All right, everybody, welcome. Welcome. This is going to be both live stream and ongoing research seminar here at Theory Underground. Today is the first day of Deep Dives with Dave. That's just what we're calling it for now. It'll probably have its own special name eventually, but that's just what made sense for now because I've put a lot more thought into the course content and its form than its marketing, right? And to that end, I'm going to go ahead and first play this clip from Mikey endorsing the endeavor here, right? Something that he was saying is, hey, Dave, you need like a hype man for this. And so I'm going to go ahead and just roll this. I'm going to have to also play it on this side for you all, the people listening over Zoom. I think I should be able to do that just fine. So 3, 2, 1.
Looked at your syllabus again for your sociology course because people don't get it, Dave. Like, they don't get that you've been prepping to teach this course for nearly 10 years now. I don't know. It's like you promote everybody else, right? It's like nobody promotes you, and it comes at a detriment, right? Because I don't know, people sleep on what you're doing. They sleep on your ability to teach and everything, and that's their loss. But I don't know. It's just, I'm sitting here wishing I could take these fucking courses, right? Like, I'm jealous. So I don't know, man. You're gonna kill it, and I wish I could be there. But no, I guess maybe it's because I've watched you for like 10 years, like research and connect the dots between these thinkers and all that. And I'm like, man, like the sociology stuff you're gonna do is fucking epic. It's 10 years in the making. I don't know, anybody who fucking is wise enough to take it now, they're fucking lucky. Again, a decade's worth of research. So yeah, you're gonna kick ass. So.
Boom. And so that's Mikey's big endorsement for me. I really appreciate it. He started his seminar just last month. He's going to be doing something once per month, indefinitely. And we've gotten a bunch of new signups for Mikey's seminar. Mikey's seminar is going to be largely focused on Zizek versus Land and the thinkers that are necessary for even thinking that contradiction, with a heavy emphasis in psychoanalysis, and obviously also we'll be getting into some Hegel, right? People who are taking that seminar are, at the end of it, going to know more about theory than almost any professors in the entire world. I guarantee it. Because Mikey has spent more time soaking up these texts and rereading them and thinking, could I explain this to a person on a bar stool? A random person on a bar stool. That's what we call the Mikey standard. It's something that I've been operating under as an assumption, as a modus operandi now for over 10 years, right? As he indicated. So he can't be here right now because he's writing his book. But, of course, these are available to binge after the fact. This one is public. Not all of them will be. But I'm really excited to have you all here. Looks like we've got a crew of people who came in through the Zoom side. I'm really excited to start getting into some of this stuff with you all. Let me first get something up on the screen. I will at some point be using the whiteboard, but I'm going to start off by just adding this screen so that you guys can see what the people in the Zoom call are seeing. Anne is amazing and is making sure that that is something that will be scrolled along with as we go here. Let me see if I can get this set up. 3, 2, 1. Boom. Here we go. This is epic. Thanks, Anne. So people can now see it, right? Let me know on the live side if everything's coming through good, audio-wise. Remember, if you're joining from the Zoom side, use the live chat link that I sent out by email a second ago. For people who are catching up with this because they're going back to the beginning and speeding forward. Great to have you. Great to have you. Great to have everybody here today. So part of the reason that I wanted to do this is because I'm teaching Sociology 101 at the university, and in reality, I cannot go as deep as I would like to be able to go. It's a huge problem. Is the sort of blockage that every educator feels when having to speak to a mass audience or a beginner audience or an audience of people who aren't even sold on the subject matter in the first place. Because you're here, because you're at Theory Underground, I can just out the door assume you care about critical theory. Now, the bigger question is do you care about sociology itself? Well, I hope so, and I'd like to show you why that matters. And I'm hoping that if any of you guys got a chance to listen to any of the Social 101 lectures that I'm doing in this series already, that you might be ready at some point. Maybe just go ahead and raise your hand and I'll call on you at some point. You could share out a little bit about what's it like listening to me lecture to university students as opposed to the sort of standard underground theorist kind of demographic that I'm usually speaking to here at Theory Underground. So for instance, I don't know, I think Ian has seen at least the first of those lectures. So maybe we'll call on Ian at some point. But my basic, I said blockage as a teacher is that in that environment, these are people who aren't even sure why they're there. They have a vague notion of what sociology is all about. They're probably there to study nursing or business, or something maybe related to sociology, something closer to it like psychology. But it's an intro class, right? And so part of the issue is getting them to loosen up around the idea of being sprayed down with a water hose in a sort of sense. Like they're there for a taste. They just want a taste. They want a sip of water. And I'm like, look, I'm going to keep it as intro level as possible, but I'm also going to blast you with a water hose. You know, you'll get your thirst quenched, and then your clothes will also be drenched. Okay? That approach is great, but I still can't water hose them as much as I might be able to water hose you all. Assuming, I mean, for the people on the Zoom side, you're part of the subscription base here. You're an actual member at Theory Underground, as opposed to the people who maybe they just subscribed to the channel because they saw something that we did with Zizek or McGowan or something like that. There's going to be this mixture. But with this mixture, I can at least assume that you care. It's a wonderful thing to be able to assume. You already care. You're already at some level sold. If you care about Zizek or McGowan or Benjamin Studebaker or Nina Power, if you care about any of these kinds of people that have become sort of regulars, sort of fellow travelers or colleagues, Chris Catrone, Michael Downs, at Theory Underground, then the chances are you need a crash course in sociology. But you'll want to get that crash course from somebody who spent at least 10 years trying to connect the dots, which is to say, bring it into dialogue with philosophy, bring it into dialogue with political science, bring it into dialogue with psychoanalysis. A theory of the subject or an approach to the good life via political theory is a great thing. It's a great endeavor. But if you're not in dialogue with the towering figures in the world of social theory, and all you do is focus on the individual subject or the analyst being analyzed by the analyst in the psychoanalytic clinic, critiquing ego psychology and therapism, there's going to be so much good that comes from that. But what is missing is a robust, dynamic, diverse, and contradictory approach to analyzing the field of sociology and social theory that is opened up between thinkers like Marx, Durkheim, Weber. I mean, right now, Niklas Luhmann is pretty popular thanks to Georg Müller over at Carefree Wandering. But for him, you need a basis in Talcott Parsons, one of the 20th century's most important social theorists. one who generally isn't taken that seriously by political activists who consider themselves radical, because they go, oh, well, he was kind of looking at society as like everything has its function in some kind of a harmonious whole. And there's some truth to that, but there's also a tremendous loss to any social theory that does not engage with the most profound innovators in the field, right? In the same way that we engage with conservative and even reactionary thinkers, as well as every other stripe of great thinker at Theory Underground, like Heidegger or Schmidt, like you have to engage with them. You can't leave them out of the picture, because then you're missing the conversation. You actually don't understand the contradictions that make up the field, that make it what it is. In the same way, we need Talcott Parsons. But of course, if you've been around for the last couple of months, then you know I'm all about Pierre Bourdieu as well. And not just as an end in himself. It's not just like we want to understand Pierre Bourdieu because Pierre Bourdieu figured it all out. No, like Talcott Parsons, except he was on the other side of the Atlantic, there is a thinker who is trying to understand everything about economics, anthropology, sociology, and using generalized principles from these three fields, as well as history, of course, to answer certain problems and questions raised by philosophy, to dialogue with and critique philosophy. This is not like my friend thought, oh, Bourdieu, he's a sociologist, he's not really engaged with philosophy. No. Like Durkheim, like Weber, like Marx, Bourdieu, as well as Parsons, really every great social thinker is steeped in philosophy and in critical theory and is in dialogue with all of these other thinkers, right? Just as much as, say, Theodor Adorno. Well, if you don't know what the main concepts are from each of those thinkers and how those concepts are responses to certain things, certain problems, certain contradictions that go unseen by a lot of the influencers on the internet today, by a lot of activists who are trying to affect positive social change, by people who believe in some kind of a broad-based emancipatory structural change in the world that could be affected. If you're not tracking with these great thinkers and thinking through the contradictions that they're spotting and that they're working through and the disagreements that they are having with one another, if they aren't sitting at your table in your mind when you work through things and you think through things, then you're going to come off naive. You're going to come off, not just come off. It's not just like, oh, like I say in my book, Waypoint, like, oh yeah, Dr. Peterson, you've got something in your teeth. You're talking about ressentiment, but also you're playing into it yourself because you don't really understand this concept. It's not just about appearances. It's not just about looking foolish. It's about wasting your time and energy, your precious time, your precious energy. We don't get to have time energy, properly speaking, right? We don't get to have that. Why? Because we're working people. We're busy people. We don't have time. We don't have energy. And so we don't have time energy, which would be, as most of you at this point are well aware, large, energy-infused, repeatable blocks of time. Energy-infused, cool, calm, and collected, energy-infused blocks of reliable time between us, right? We don't have that, right? The condition for being able to play the violin is time energy, but that's the same condition for being able to soak up the life of the mind and enter into all of these different fields and sort of have a conversation with all these theorists that you see right here. Something's going spazzy on my headphones, so I'm going to go ahead and change it really quick here. Hello, beautiful listener. I see you. Just kidding. I can't. But I have to interrupt this just really quick to make my own advertisement, my very own. The one that says subscribing, liking, commenting, it actually makes a really big difference. So even if you're just on the free side, shout out to you. Thanks for doing it. Make sure to subscribe and all that. Especially people on the podcast, make sure to say something nice in the reviews. It actually really helps. And I need reviews on every platform, all right? Because I just hate to say it, it matters, you know? I try not to chase the almighty algorithm, but also I don't want to have all of this beautiful content go to waste. And so I'm trying to walk a fine line between quality and quantity. And I come out way heavier on the side of quality, as you can obviously see we do here. But come on, let's push that subscribe button, you know? Let's smash that like button, you know? Like, teach the algorithm what you actually care about, all right? And then maybe it'll show it to other people. That's great. All right, let's get back to it. We're back. So I played that little commercial just because I had an issue with my audio. I was going to play it at some point. I wasn't going to play it this soon. And but let's see if you all can see what's on the screen here. This is my beautiful intro to sociology sort of thumbnail, right? I'd like to spend a moment talking about it because when I'm talking about getting a basis in the field and not looking like a fool or not doing dumbass reasoning, right? Like there's a lot of really great thinkers who are philosophers, who are psychoanalysts, but they are not able to take their insights into thinking about society because they're not thinking with these three motherfuckers on the top left of this image. And for those listening in the future on the podcast version, I'll just go ahead and say what they are or who they are. It's Marx, Durkheim, and Weber. There's this huge emphasis on focusing on material conditions and the mode of production and the relations of production. And it's an emphasis that I'm never going to let go of. I've been marked for life. It's where time energy theory comes from. That plus a sort of Heideggerian approach is absolutely essential to time energy theory and everything that I've ever done at Theory Underground and before it. But it's not the last word on thinking about the social. Marx is absolutely essential, but Durkheim and Weber are as profound of thinkers as Immanuel Kant, as profound of thinkers as Charles Darwin, as profound of thinkers as, say, in anthropology, Boas, right? There are so many of these thinkers, or Leo Strauss for that matter. There are so many of these absolutely amazing thinkers in anthropology, in history, in economics. And most of them have to read Marx. They have to tarry with Marx. They have to think through Marx. And if they're really based in the history of ideas and social movements, then they also have to be reading Proudhon and Kropotkin and Lassalle or Lassay, or I can never say that motherfucker's name. But the point is like there's a whole bunch of theorists from that time, from working class movements, from radical world historic social change movements that have intervened in the development of history, the humanities, and the social sciences. You think Zizek just reads philosophy? You think Zizek just reads Hegel and Lacan? No, of course not. You can't read him without him referencing these guys. But it's not just these guys, these three great towering figures, each one of whom has an entire approach to thinking about the social that has tools. Each one of them develops tools that it doesn't matter if you're an armchair social theorist or not, any real thinker in the 21st century has to have these tools in their toolkit. Now, I don't come off this hardcore, I think, in the lectures that I do at the university. I'm not coming out the door this hot, this strong. But I feel it's necessary on the internet because you have to make things clear. You have to be to the point. You have to make your claims loud and sort of, you have to break through the noise. And so the noise, my way of breaking through the noise here is to say, if you're not thinking with these people, are you really able to think about the social? I mean, I'm surrounded by people who are able to think about the social, but they don't sound much smarter than my MAGA parents or my in-laws who are, all excited for Kamala right now. I might have Marxists in my life. I might have Lacanians in my life who are, they've got strong opinions about things and they think about society, but their reasoning that they are so used to using, and it's cogent when they're doing it at this individual level, it's no longer valid when it's taken to the social. There's this gap between thinking at this individual level, this philosophic or psychoanalytic level, and then taking that to this larger scale. There's this gap. And a lot of people just jump over that. They hurdle over it without even realizing that they've leapt over something. They don't realize that there's this abyss that they are traversing. And like I said, it's not just about looking foolish. It's about wasting your time, wasting your energy. So some of the other thinkers that are on this, who you will become well acquainted with through my seminar that I am doing over the next few years as a sort of a series of deeper dives into this Introduction to Sociology course that I'm teaching at the university, are beneath Marx, Durkheim, Weber, we have Frantz Fanon, W.E.B. Du Bois, Emmanuel Levinas, Irving Goffman, Friedrich Nietzsche, Michel Foucault, Dr. Adolf Reed Jr., Simone de Beauvoir. And I've also got, I believe that's Shulamith Firestone. I'm pretty sure that's Shulamith Firestone right there. But it's not just, I've got Firestone, and then I've got one other person up here, and that is Silvia Federici. So their faces are newer to me, even though I've been reading them over the last couple of years. They're absolutely essential for thinking about Marxism and feminism. Also, obviously, we've got Luce Irigaray, an intervention in both Heideggerian and Lacanian studies, but she's also a social thinker. And then on the top right there, actually, we've got a couple people who would not normally be on a Theory Underground agenda. That's Patricia Hill Collins and Kimberly Crenshaw, the two towering thinkers of critical race theory and intersectionality. And of course, people who are surprised to see them on my list, remember, I'm at the university. I have to start with where people are. And intersectionality is all the rage right now in activist circles. They are a part of the conversation. Doing an immanent critique of your current situation for Marx would have simply meant, British political economy, socialist and anarchist working class, radical theory from France, and German idealism, as well as obviously the rest of the history of philosophy, but mainly those three big movements at the time. And then he thought those three things in dialogue inside out, right? What would it mean for us today? Well, we're going to have to work through these thinkers and more. There's a bunch that don't make it on this list. I mean, the fact is Friedrich Engels is as important as Marx when it comes to sociology and anthropology. In a sort of sense, the face of Marx is a metonym for Marx and Engels. I mean, literally, he's an extension of Engels' money, right? Engels was getting so much from his collaborations with Marx that he was constantly sending his daddy's money that direction. And I don't know how he explained it to his dad or if he even had to, but, that's a fun story. So, yeah, we've got Kimberly Crenshaw, Patricia Hill Collins. Yeah, but who's to the left of them? Barbara Ehrenreich. And who's below Barbara Ehrenreich? Vandana Shiva, right? I think when it comes to post-colonial theory. I've already got Franz Fanon up there. But, I could have put Spivak and Homi K. Bhabha. But I kind of, it just makes me sick to my stomach that they're more popular than Vandana Shiva when she's so much more rich and deep. At least that's where my current position is. I might change on that eventually, but so far I've been pretty unimpressed with the people who simp on and on for Spivak and Bhabha. They're mostly just people who are, trying to read Victorian literature from this sort of post-colonial lens. Vandana Shiva writes prolifically, but also she is sort of this fountainhead of organizing around soil, land, and seed sovereignty for peasant and farmer movements across the globe. She was a good friend of Wendell Berry, the radical farmer who I've been referencing for the last couple of weeks as we get into this distinction of exploitation versus nurture. Very important. It's not the same thing as oppression versus, oppressed versus oppressors, right? Exploitation versus nurture. Much, much, much more important distinction. Most people are using like these old cloth, like knockoff Stalinist concepts, and they think that they are thinking the current situation and they've got nothing new to say. We, on the other hand, are coming to you at Theory Underground with this rich network of thinkers. And there are many, many, many more than are able to fit on this image. But the last name that I left off, obviously, is Pure Bourdieu on the bottom right. He's kind of looking up at the whole situation. But those are just the names of the thinkers. What are the other images that you see here? Let's do a little I Spy game. Come on, look at it with me. What else do you see? In the very middle, it says Introduction to Sociology with David McKerracher. That's me, right? But what are those words over? A bubble. And what's inside that bubble? It's an image I chose very carefully. To me, this is a sort of rose-tinted glasses look at American suburbia. There's even some hot air balloons floating over the top in the background there, which is amazing. Ann and I are just right now actually coming back from Spirit of Boise. If you look at my Instagram right now, you'll see a bunch of pictures from that. Basically, what is Spirit of Boise? Well, it's when a bunch of hot air balloons go up from the park. And it's just good vibes, man. The people who wake up at 6 a.m. and bring their kids to see these kind of things are just the best kinds of people. There's so many people who are just doers, who are excited about life, who are like trying to be good parents. And there are just so many cute kids. And just like Ann and I, like we want to start a family someday. And we're just like there and we're just like soaking it all in, feeling great, drinking coffee. The DJs at the radio station, they're telling dad jokes. It is like this little slice of Americana, the dream, this American dream. And it is a bubble. It is a fantasy, which is to say it's not actually real. It's partially correct, but it's not the truth. What is the truth? We have to zoom out beyond the bubble. And what do you see outside of the bubble besides these thinkers? The U.S. military, which is just a metonym. That soldier and tank is just a metonym for boots on the ground in over 150 countries and an intelligence apparatus that is able to keep track of virtually everything going on everywhere all of the time, including the location that you inhabit at this very moment in your room. Like they can see everything. Like that shouldn't sound paranoid, but of course I have that image right underneath the most paranoid philosopher of all time, Michel Foucault, who of course doesn't call himself a philosopher. Most people after Heidegger don't call themselves philosophers, but for our purposes, he's a social theorist and a philosopher. And he's known for being a little paranoid. Everything is power. Everything is prisons. Everything is discipline. right? All the way down. Turtle, 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 turtle. It's all power, 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 power. Prison, prison, prison. The memes, it's always like anything that looks like a cage. Michel Foucault, right? And there is a sort of paranoid way of taking this analysis of what goes on outside of the bubble of power, prestige, privilege, capital that we have inside of inside the circle, right? They're looking at what goes on outside of that can make us paranoid. It can make us a little frothing at the mouth, Palestine flag avatar, people who are just kind of always a little deranged, right? And the reason they're always a little deranged, to their credit, is because they're trying to look at what's real. And they know that what's going on inside that circle is not real. And so they think when they're looking at videos of little kids blown up all across their Instagram from Sean King's, activist user profile, influencer page, whatever you want to call it. They get a little upset. It's the same with like if you're following Black Lives Matter hashtag all the time. You're seeing a lot of messed up stuff every day, right? But you're trying to look at what's real, right? You're trying to look at what's real, and you're like, I'm not going to look away. I'm not going to go back to the mall and go back to shopping and go back to my normal life, my normal cozy life. First of all, because that was never real. Second of all, it was a childish dream. Third of all, it's not even possible anymore. It's unlikely that I'll ever even have a home. It's unlikely that I'll be anything other than a wage-earning renter. Right? For our parents, it was so easy to buy homes. For us, like they're like 900% more expensive than they were at the time that our parents were. And we're getting paid less. And the careers are less stable, right? So people want to look at what's real, and they also know that their horizon of possibilities is extremely limited, right? But what else is there? It's not just the sort of paranoid intelligence apparatus and military industrial complex sort of side of things. It's also extraction. I don't have any pictures of manufacture. I just have pictures of extraction, which is a very important part of production. We have little African kids who are mining cobalt. Above, on the top there, we've got some dads in Belize who are sugarcane farming. To the right of the sugarcane farmers, we've got a little girl who is picking beans for your coffee. Speaking of which, Anne, I don't know if you could, I think that pot is probably brewed. If you would bring me a cup, that'd be killer. Beneath the coffee, farming, you've got this white dad with a couple of kids who are crying, saying goodbye to him. What do you see if you look real close behind that dad? It's a truck. It's a semi-truck. So why are the kids crying? The kids are crying because daddy's going to be leaving for a long time. Daddy's leaving for 2 months. Well, there's a certain age where like kids really need their parents. And after a certain age, if their parents weren't really around for that time, they just resent them. And then they become little activists whose entire... Oh, kitty. Anne brought me the coffee, and she said that she had to disengage from a kitten being on her lap. That's the worst thing ever. That's a real sacrifice. Thank you. And this father is... essentially, at this point, his kids are going to miss him, but at some point, they might not miss him. They might just resent him. His opportunity to be a father is what's on the line here. But also, being a caring father means supporting your family, and most truckers didn't see any other options that would bring in as much money as they needed to bring in. We're talking about time energy being negated in its reduction to labor power. We're talking about the families that become dysfunctional and fatherless And even increasingly, and Frederick Engels was talking about this even back in the 1840s when he was writing or doing the research for the conditions of the English working class, the mothers are also absent. Absentee mothers, absentee fathers, and he says the children are growing up like wild weeds. And then you have conservatives today. They want that trucker to have a little bit more of a head nod from the Republican Party. They want, some kind of representation or recognition for the struggles of that father. But is anything that they're going to do concretely going to change the situation where that man has to leave his family for months on end? What about Democrats? Are they any better? At the bottom of the image, though, we see some people in suits, silhouetted, walking around, and the outline or silhouette of institutions. What makes up what I just said in the 4th lecture for Sociology 101, which is something all of my subscribers here have access to, what I call the institutional matrix. The institutional matrix is made up of what Louis Althusser, someone who should have his image on here if I could fit it, what Louis Althusser called the ideological and repressive apparatuses. These are the apparatuses necessary for reproducing the status quo, more or less as it is today. Of course, everything solid melts into air. The mall that you grew to love, that you frequented, bye-bye. The coffee shop that you love, that you frequented, bye-bye. Blockbuster Video on Friday nights with the fam, oh, bye-bye. Good luck having any sort of mainstay in your life. There used to be a temple that everyone went to, and it was a center of civic life, right? And it was somehow like directly embedded in the nobility and the monarchy, and everyone just had a center of gravity for their lives. But there was a Copernican revolution in the humanities and social sciences and philosophy as well. There was a Copernican revolution. The floor fell out from under everyone. The center was no more. And that's why Nietzsche said, God is dead. And we have killed him. Not like, oh, we can bring him back. Of course, you have 3 movies in a series called God's Not Dead. Because evangelical Christians want to be like, oh, Nietzsche, he's wrong. God's still alive as ever. And what they're missing is the point, which is that the center of gravity for an embedded kind of civic life, that has fallen out. And now there are a proliferation of competing centers of gravity that can only ever work for a small handful of people. We call these niche, boutique, consumer demographics that people use to stitch together some kind of a sense of belonging. But this institutional matrix made up of these apparatuses, ideological and repressive both, many of which are a mixture of those two things. Althusser is clear on this. Those play roles in subjectivizing us, interpolating and then socializing us to be certain kinds of people. Professional managerial critique is not, as that person said recently on Substack, oh, I couldn't take you seriously, Dave, because you're blaming all of capitalism on the BMC. No, that's not the point, actually. I don't think it could be any more wrong than that. No, the point of professional managerial critique is to say almost anybody who is thinking about institutions and the way they subjectivize us, the implicit but also explicit messages. It's usually the explicit messages, but the explicit, the implicit messages and ideology of these institutions, whether they be in media like Hollywood or news, or if we're talking about the medium, the smartphone, the way that it affects us at this implicit sort of environmental level of mediation, or if we're talking about the repressive apparatuses, the borders, the police, the soldiers, the etc. The people who think about this stuff belong to the professional managerial crust. They are the professionals and managers of capital reproduction itself, which is not the same thing as saying that all they care about is the reproduction of capital. No, as Ehrenreich is very clear, they actually usually have other kinds of interests than the interests of capital, other kinds of interests than the interests of state. Where we need to be cautious and on high alert is to see when the interests of state and of capital and the professional talking heads, when all of their interests are aligned. When all of their interests are aligned, we're not even going to see a contradiction. We're not even going to hear about it. We're definitely not going to get taught it in school, not even by someone teaching supposed critical race theory. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get that from conservatives. You're not going to get that from liberals or progressives. You're not going to get it from anyone except for potentially right-wing dissidents or leftist, communist, or anarchist insurrectionary activists. Maybe. But considering the fact that both left and right, when it comes to insurrectionaries, are almost always just more extreme sort of polemical versions of their parents, or the opposite of what their parents are, considering the fact that most of the time they're just trying to push Democrats or Republicans left or right, it's unlikely that when the interests of state, capital, and the PMC are aligned, you'll actually hear it from radical thinkers today. And that's why there has to be some place for people who are not signing off on some political agenda, some prefigured bandwagon, some party platform, some movement that they might hitch themselves to or say that they are the rightful inheritors and spokespeople of. No, there needs to be a place for people who aren't rushing into action, but are instead saying, okay, we've tried to change the world, and maybe we tried in the 20th century a little too quickly. The time now is to think again. The time now is actually to interpret. Now, of course, if you're like us, we actually got to have our cake and eat it too. We got to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. We got to do multiple things at the same time. We need thinking and we need action. We need interpretation and we need practical experiments. And we are, as workers with earbuds at Theory Underground, more able to rise to that challenge than anyone else on the internet. Sure, plenty of people on the internet have the capability, but they have not been interpolated as such. They do not see themselves as such. They're not thinking in these terms. And because they're not thinking in these terms, and they haven't been for the last couple of years, and they're not part of this emerging underground theorist crew that is trying to use theory and practice, trying to use experimental methods and interdisciplinary approaches to try to make sense of the situation, if you're not part of what we're doing here, chances are you could do something like it, but it can't just come out of a void, and it can't come about just because you snapped your fingers and you want it to happen. There are certain things that have to be in place. Filters need to be set up for containers that can foster the conditions for certain kinds of learning environments that counter the tendencies of the attention economy. You can't find enough people to talk about this in your own city. Not as many different things as we want to be able to hold together. You have to do it through the internet as well. But it can't be just through the internet, because there are certain tendencies that come with internet relationships that must be countered. Certain dynamics that must be preempted. And some of these tendencies can be harnessed, other ones just need to be countered. And one of the ones that we counter here as a sort of filter for our container is to weed out cowards, to weed out people who just want to talk, and act like everybody is just this great community of peers. Weed out the people who aren't willing to do the work of actually cracking open books and immersing themselves in these discourses. But some people just don't have the time energy for that. Yet, they persevere. And the people at Theory Underground are not like that person was saying recently on Twitter. I shared this in the Discord and everyone had a good laugh. Rich. Where are all these people coming from to support this kind of content in this Patreon? First of all, there's like nobody in the Patreon. Shout out to the people who are. It's very small, very, very small Patreon. That's not the point. No, 45 people make this possible for me. 45 to 60, because it fluctuates. I lose people, I gain people. But overall, there is a very small amount of people, smaller than your average Baptist church, your small, like, town Baptist church, able to support me doing this full time at this point. Thank you to you guys. I was able to quit Amazon, so.
Amazing.
Fucking amazing. Thank you. For real. But there are certain filters that have to be set up. We're filtering out cowards. We're filtering out people who are just in it for the party, the aesthetic, the fuckboy energy, the whatever kind of games people like to play as socialites and hipsters. And we're trying to do something realer than all of that. But it's hard to find that kind of shit on the internet. There's a bunch of people who can't tell the difference between me and plastic pills and what we're doing. I'm not dunking on what he's doing. I'm just saying it's very different. It's like as different as writing books and making blog posts. It's as different as teaching courses and playing the guitar down at the city center. It's that different. And people want to try to say that, oh, well, it's all part of the same thing. Well, potentially. But I'm pretty much down to work with almost anybody. People like that, though, maybe not so much. Maybe a little bit more audience capture. And it's not a audience capture to people who are regular working people. It's to dyed-in-the-wool lifestyle online leftists. And that's made up of a lot of great people. It's a lot of great people, but if you spend too much time catering to such an audience, you're not going to be able to have conversations with people who are very different from you. You're not going to be able to hold and express honest disagreements with the mainstream tendencies in activist culture. You're not going to be able to do it. And if you're not able to do that, your thinking itself becomes limited. It all becomes very postmodern in the worst sense, not the best sense, which we have the best sense here. Not everyone else has the best sense. Now, there's a lot of these big platforms. People would do anything to get on those big platforms, but they just write us off as reactionary because we collaborated with Power, or because somebody was spreading around a whisper campaign talking shit about one of us. And it's fine because that's all part of what I mean by filtering out certain kinds of people from the container. It's not a container where people can't leave. It's actually we want people to leave. It's much better if more people are leaving than coming, because the internet is mostly made up of people who are in between things and not sure what they want to do with themselves. In between things, not sure what they want to do with themselves. And maybe they've been that way for 10 years, right? And if you can get some kind of a kick in the pants that gets you going on a project that's unrelated to Theory Underground, but you get that from being here for a couple months, that's amazing. That's great. But for the people who are looking to be here longer term, one of the reasons we lead with the idea of the university and professional managerial critique and the critical media theory and critical doxology and time energy sort of boxing gloves, CMT, CDT, CMT, CDT. Part of the reason we lead with Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Lacan, Bourdieu, it's not as an end point, but as a way of giving us a sturdy enough basis for being able to actually get the lay of the land and understand it's not just all this giant consumer demographic of leftist theory, which is what a lot of people tend to think it is. No, it's what the university is supposed to be achieving, which is providing an interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary infrastructure for thinking about the world, the universal, the human, so that singular human beings who care about the subject matters that pertain to or are in the proper domain of these various fields are able to talk to other people who care about related things, or maybe stuff that's completely off the map, so that we can form some kind of a working understanding of the situation. But instead, what academia has become is a center for the development of weaponry. I'm holding in my book here the Disciplined Minds by Jeff Schmidt, a critical look at salaried professionals and the soul battering system that shapes their lives. He doesn't focus on the soft sciences and how corrupt they are, which is very popular in conservative circles today. He focuses on physics and engineering and shows how almost everything being done under those headers, under STEM, is currently serving the military-industrial complex, and its funding is being laundered through think tanks and nonprofits, but ultimately it's getting printed by the government and it's being allocated by the intelligence apparatuses and the actual military itself. The rest of the research, most of it happening in the social sciences and humanities, is being done along these sort of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and ultimately HR trying to cover its ass so that giant corporations don't get sued, combined with marketing research, how to hack the psyche, how to distract the user, how to read big data and manipulate mass movements and organizations and households and you at the level of your little egoism. Critical social theory, CST, as the umbrella for critical media theory, critical doxology and timenergy, critique of gender and sexuality, critique of psychiatry and therapism, all of these other like sort of subfields of CST that we don't want to let go of and that we want to highlight and that we want to center in this sort of sense, is all absolutely necessary for understanding where the thinking is coming from that constitutes our current situation at the level of theory. Not just like, oh, it's coming from, say, the PMC, and it's these people who serve these apparatuses, and they're a certain kind of disciplined subject, and their psychopolitical subjectivity is just so different. That's not the point. The point is not just like, oh, what's realistic for them is unrealistic for us because we're workers with earbuds. No. It's not just about where they are and understanding how we're different. It's understanding how we can meaningfully engage, how we can meaningfully learn from them, and how we can meaningfully, in the long run of things, actually intervene in these various fields. And it's a long game approach. It's not sexy. It's not flashy. I don't put hundreds of hours into every little video that I put out so I can maximize exposure and get the broadest reach possible so that every little distracted teenager goes, oh, that's pretty colors. I like the flashy flash. I'm going to subscribe to that. No. I care about people who are mostly between the ages of 27 and 35 to 42. That's my demographic, not because I chose it, but because that's the kind of people you get when you stop appealing to teenagers and little teenagers who are activists who got a problem with their parents and who actually don't buy what the hope industry salespeople in politics are selling, and instead say, hey, I would rather spend some more time with people who disagree with me if they can actually help me understand the situation. So I'm about to sort of switch gears here. I'm about to go over to the whiteboard. I'm about to sort of do part 2 of this live stream. There's a couple things I want to touch on before switching it over here. but what we're going to get into is I'm going to speed run for you all the and if you could just scroll down slightly to the table of contents. Get the table of contents in here. Let's see if I can get that all in frame for people. This is just the outline of Soc 101 if you are in my class here at Boise State. And of course, my students might actually end up watching some of this. They might, I mean, they're able to. Chances are, though, the people who have the time for deep dives with Dave are going to be Theory Underground subscribers, and people who make the time for doing both, right? Because my subscribers get access to this course. And so really quick, I just wanted to check, Ian, are you there? Ian, are you able to say anything? I am curious about you or anyone else who has watched Soc 101 so far.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, let me fix my headphones because I can't hear you. 1 second. Everyone else could hear you, but two. Okay, I can hear you now. So you want to tell yeah, I'm curious because I haven't actually asked you yet, you know, how was Soc 101? How is it different from what you're used to with my teaching style? Yeah, what do you got for us in terms of all
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think it was a well-designed class for the intended audience, which are like people in college may not or who may not be as familiar with the topics as people who are actively looking for this topic, right? So I thought it was like your style obviously changes in a way that you make it more uh, accessible to them, and also I think you were doing good connections for them to maybe see why this may be important for them, like giving examples of their lives, right? And like something that may connect with their careers and stuff like that. So I think, yeah, I think the class obviously was less like heavy in the concepts and so on, but I think it's great because it had enough to spark curiosity. I think that is very important. And also like you bringing the books to the class, I think that is a great way for I use myself right as an example of being a student. Like if I see the teacher bringing the copies of the books that he already read and so on, I'm like, ah, okay, like this is nice. And also he's like saving me money, right? Like he's like, I really want you to read this book. Here is the book. Like you have no like not a good excuse to not do it. And yeah, I mean, I was also enjoying like listening to the people in the class and their questions, and it seemed like they were like a bit like unsure about sociology in the first class, but you can see them getting more into it by the fourth one. So yeah, I mean, I think it's good. I think also what like the water hose method, it's really good because, and also what you were, there were two things that I think were really important that I wish more professors at university told, that it's like the intergenerational conversation that you gotta develop with other like authors and so on. And I think that applies to any field, right? Like if you are doing like painting or something like that, like you gotta learn like the history of painting and what others were painting before. And then the other one was the nonlinear approach of learning. I think that makes a lot of sense, especially with like, you know, like with sociology, philosophy, and feels like may not need such a linearity, because I feel like that linearity comes from perhaps more like science, that you need to take like steps by step to understand like the whole picture. But in here, I don't think so, right? Like I think you may start with Bourdieu, and then you're like, ah, okay, Bourdieu is talking about Marx. Let me go see Marx, and then like, then Marx talks about like someone else, and you go back. So I think making those concepts clear is really helpful for students.
Tight, yeah.
Thanks, Ian. That's great. I don't think anyone else has actually binged any of those lectures yet. You already listened to all 4 of them. That's awesome. Anyone else? Anyone else? Any other takers here before we switch gears? Wukach, did you?
I haven't watched the lectures yet, but I don't know if you want to take a question from the chat, but there was a good one. Juice Dude asked, basically said that it's great that you are talking about all of these like big figures, but also asked if you are going to discuss any current research. And I thought that maybe you want to respond to this.
Yeah, that's really good. 100%. So I was planning on actually checking the chat between here and the whiteboard. Now that we're done with the first hour, we're about to move into the next phase of things, but let's kind of touch on some stuff from chat, and we'll start with that one. That's a great one. Current research. But first I want to say something to what Ian was talking about. And the point is for me, yeah, non-linearity versus STEM, right? So STEM, you know, which is science, technology, engineering, and math, or maths if you're in Europe. It's not as retroversive as the humanities and social sciences. I'm waving around Molly Ann Rothenberg's book, The Excessive Subject, a new theory of social change. And I mean, more than the new theory of social change that she's trying to develop there, like what sticks with me from that book, and the reason that the social change part didn't stick with me is because I haven't finished the book. I've only read the first half of it. But the part that sticks with me from all of that, it's not so much like what she does with Foucault and Marx and trying to argue against both of them and go beyond both of them while using parts of both of them, which is fascinating. No, what's most important for me is her theory of retroversion. And actually that's what Slavoj Žižek in his foreword to her book, see, he also wrote her a foreword. It's not just me who gets a foreword from Žižek. He wrote one for her. I'm kidding. Before Žižek wrote that foreword for me, I was under the impression he wrote forewords for like everybody. Turns out it's not true. Only a handful of people. But he loved this example she used so much that he named the foreword with the keen edge of a knife, because that's the part of a sentence that quilts everything to this first part here, where she says, retroversion is one of the most common but least acknowledged forces in human social relations. We encounter it in every use of language. When you read that Carl smiled as he gently stroked the velvety skin of his lover, you may find your initial picture of this apparent love scene altered irrevocably by the next phrase, with the keen edge of a knife. Using language means making constant adjustments as the field of meaning widens, narrows, and then circles back on itself. The opportunity and the need for such adjustment is ever present, but has unpredictable effects. And then she talks about how, you know, this is retroversion, the retroactive way that some new meaning can quilt the previous meaning in a sort of chain of meanings. This is inherent to language. It's inherent to cognition. It's inherent to comprehension. Yet the schooling system gives people the school brain syndrome condition where they think that everything is like the mathematics approach that says you got to learn your 1 + 1 = 2 before you can learn your times tables, before you can learn division, before you can learn algebra, and it's all like these stair steps. And of course, for polymath great minds of history, it was never that stair-steppy. There were stair steps, but they were not these standardized mass education stair steps that leave fast-thinking people behind, that at the same time leave slow-thinking people behind, that at the same time leave average-thinking people behind. And ultimately, different people thinking at different speeds is only half the problem. The other part of the problem, speed of thinking, in some cases that never really changes for a person, but comprehension and the ability to really sit with a text and mull it over and live through its concepts, the kind of philosophical maturity that can come from that kind of tarrying with texts and being immersed in them and cross-referencing them and bringing them into dialogue with one another, that is something different, and it's retroversive, which is to say non-linear. So here you go, Deep Dives with Dave. You're always going to get the deeper version of something going on at that intro level. If you're listening to the intro level stuff and you bring up something that you like, I'm always going to add on to it, because everything in that class is just the tip. It's just the tip. Just the tip of the iceberg. Don't be a pervert. So non-linearity versus STEM. Very important. Very important. But the current research issue, I take it to be a huge issue. You're not going to get situated in the field that I've sort of laid out for you all here. You're not going to get that situatedness or orientation in the field. Being your one guy, whether it be Marx or Lacan, and then reading them deeply, maybe reading a couple of the people who carried on their name for a little while, and then turning around and reading some contemporary stuff. I mean, it's great to know the debate between Michael Roberts and David Harvey over like what are the essential crises of capitalism, and Michael Roberts accusing David Harvey of leaving out the tendency of the rate of profit to fall and focusing on a social democratic concern, which would be the concern of the consumption crisis, right? People like to focus on the consumption crisis because it's a lot easier to explain to a 5-year-old the tendency for the rate of profit to fall. Even though Ted Reese is really good at explaining it, it's not easy. It's not easy. Looks like we probably have hiccuped here on the live stream side of things. I think probably you all are seeing this sort of stutter. The stream is chuggy right now. If Nance was around, I'd probably have him take over the stream, but I think he still hasn't set up his Wi-Fi yet. Like, he's still in between things with his move. So I'm sorry about the slow internet speed. Anne and I will turn off Wi-Fi on our phones, and hopefully that will speed things up just a little bit. But, you know, it is what it is. It's the 21st century. It's 2024, and internet is faster than it's ever been, but it's also more irregular. It is what it is. But anyway, what I just said with this example between the debate, the example of the debate between Michael Roberts and David Harvey as two contemporary Marxists, it's a great example because there are so many of these kinds of debates that constitute the fields of these different subfields of the humanities and social sciences. To really get the implications of these debates, you kind of actually have to understand the initial arguments in the first place. And to even understand the initial arguments in the first place, it's not like there's like this orthodox single view on what Durkheim was all about, or what Talcott Parsons or Weber was all about. Each one of them influences different other great thinkers in different ways. And you, as a potential great thinker, reading them, you're going to get something from that primary that primary brush with the actual voice of that author. You're going to get something from them that you're not going to get from secondary literature. And secondary literature, as well as current research, a lot of what's called current research, I put big scare quotes around current research, a lot of it is acting like you all don't actually have to go get that primary time with those authors, and they're also acting like they did, when everything I've experienced with graduate students tells me most of the time they didn't get that primary time with the great voices in their field. They're in a hurry to make a contribution. It's like every 20 through 26-year-old who's in a hurry to start a YouTube channel or a blog. They're in a hurry to get their media career started, and they're trying to figure out, what's my message? I'm going to make a message. Instead of going, what if I just like do research? What if I just learn and focus on learning and share my learning as I go, right? If you share your learning as you go and you say, hey, I actually am not the master of all. I'm just on this process, or in this process, I'm on this endeavor to try to make sense of something, and I'm going to share that with you as I go. They're instead in a hurry to kind of go up. I'm going to just focus on aesthetics and rhetoric because I've got it figured out. I know what people need to hear, right? I think that one of the things that workers with earbuds have that is an advantage over your typical graduate student is time to kill. You've got time to listen and listen and listen and repeat the things that stick with you. And you're not in a hurry to rush to publishing, right? Because you're not trying to build out your CV so that you can get on tenure track. So you have a kind of freedom. Now, there's a huge problem that comes from that. There are these central debates in the field, like the labor theory of value versus value-form Marxism, or the tendency for the rate of profit to fall versus the consumption crisis. That is contemporary stuff. And if you're just going to the original primary texts and you're spending all this time bogged down and trying to read Capital Volume 1, you already have certain assumptions about the labor theory of value, certain assumptions about the primary crises or contradictions within capitalism. You already have certain assumptions, and those assumptions were formed by watered down scholarship in the first place, probably, or you're just repeating certain mistakes made by people still alive today. Who knows? And you don't know. You don't have reference to the current research. I put scare quotes around current research, but the current literature, there is current literature. Some of it is real research. Some of it is just people trying to get published in certain journals. The main point of their article is to indicate that they did the primary research and that they also can name drop some of the people in the journal. That's their real goal with their piece. You read a lot of abstracts and it's like, what's the point of that? And then you read the piece and you're like, oh, so like they basically didn't say anything, but they still got published because they sort of, you know, they name drop the right people, right? Other times, though, you get these titles of pieces that are so misleading. And actually, it's almost like what they need is like clickbait that just tells you what it means. But like Judith Stein from Renewing Black Intellectual History. This is something I've read on stream back before the Theory Underground days. Of Mr. Booker T. Washington and others, the political economy of racism in the United States. What a title. It doesn't actually make me think anything. But if you actually know what she's talking about, it's basically why all the historians of racism are wrong and are basically positing psycho-cultural spiritual racism as the cause mover of history, which is basically like saying white people's feelings make history move. White people being racist for this period made things bad for black people. White people being less racist for a while made the Civil War possible. The betrayal of Reconstruction was on the basis of white people being racist again. It's just that. It's just that simple. And then she's going to show you the political economic conditions. And when I say that, I mean the ways that the Democrats and Republicans worked together to betray Reconstruction by rolling out policies that returned institutionalized racism at the level of law so that different kinds of privilege were actually objectively encoded into the fabric of society so as to divide up what was at the time a rising working class movement with millions of white miners and black sharecroppers. This is between the 1870s and 1880s. This book is very new. It only came out in the last few years. This book is definitely current research. So is what I was just referencing with Marx and these crucial sort of contradictions. But I think that the best that we can do.
What was that book called again? Really quick.
Renewing Black Intellectual History, the Ideological and Material Foundations of African American Thought, put together by Dr. Adolph Reed Jr. and Kenneth W. Warren. Yeah, it's actually falling apart because I've beat the shit out of this book as I've been reading it since 2020. But anyway, yeah, if you're just tired of the story about what racism is and what its real causes are and how progressives talk about it and also how conservatives talk about it, then this course is going to be a good course for you, right? But I mean, ultimately, I think the way you get current research, the way that current research becomes relevant and that you can tell the difference between good quality current research and, careerist literature. The reason that you can, the way to even tell the difference is to spend enough time with objectively great, towering fields in these or thinkers in these respective fields. And that by doing that, your sense for quality will go up. Your sense for when somebody is not being fair to one of these thinkers will be heightened. And do that with other people that you can more or less trust, or by slipstreaming, right? Get in the draft of, like, people who are going to accelerate your entry point into these fields. Because Anne was just saying something about how it's really too bad that I didn't go to a regular high school, or like a high school like hers, at least. Maybe not a regular high school, but a high school at least like as good as hers. Because she was saying that if I had sat in the right math classes, I would have gotten so much more out of it. And it's because, and actually, Anne, I'll ask you just to kind of share why you said that. But I saw this clip of this Professor Garrity. You can look him up. He's a math teacher, and he's so powerful. And it's just like watching this clip of him made me go down this rabbit hole where I watched a bunch of his stuff on YouTube. And now I'm excited, and I just want to like study math under this guy. Never, ever thought that would happen. And it's because my time in college was with a bunch of professors who didn't care. They wanted to get us through the classes so that we could get on with our lives, but they weren't trying to share a love for their fields. And so, Anne, how is that different for you in your situation?
Yeah, I was saying how, like, my time in math classes in high school, for example, like, most of my math teachers were really good and were excited about their field. Like our statistics teacher, that was everyone's favorite class whenever they took a class with her, because she was just so energetic about it. And so I feel like there is, when you're teaching, there is not only a transfer of knowledge and a sharing of knowledge, but like there's a sharing of energy, and you can feel it. And even like the instructor doesn't have to be like so energized or coming off as like hyper or overly excited necessarily, but they can still be like kind of cool, calm, and collected, but just their energy and their love of the subject and their passion for the subject can come through in their teaching if you have the right teacher or professor. It's like my last semester of college, and I'd put off all my science credits because I didn't really care about science. And I took a geology 101 class, and that ended up being like my favorite class of that semester, and one of my favorite classes I took at Boise State, because this professor he cared a lot about the field, and you could just tell that he was really knowledgeable. That's another thing, is like when a professor or teacher just has like knowledge about it, and they're clearly engaging with the field and thinking about it outside of just, I have to regurgitate this textbook to you all. It's like it makes the experience more meaningful. And then rubs off on you, and then you get excited about it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. And I like the point that it could be a very cool, calm, and collected professor. They don't have to be like this math professor. He starts out with like almost like yelling at the audience. He's like, how does he say it? What does he lead with? He says,
Functions
describe the world. And then he just goes on this like litany of like, this is a function, that's a function. My words hitting your, and he starts describing the biology of it. These are functions. Everything's functions. And it's just, and it's like, okay, a functionalist account of everything, if that's what you really believe everything actually is. Of course, it's going to be problematic from our perspective, but it's true that they do describe the world. It's true that you want to understand things, and part of understanding things is understanding things using functions. And having someone lead with that is powerful. But you don't have to be yelling. You don't have to be that kind of crazy energy. His is like a nervous energy. Like he's actually, you can hear it in his every word. Like he's nervous to be talking. He's like the biggest math nerd scared to talk. But when he starts talking about math, he's so excited that it's just intoxicating. And all the people in the comments are like, oh my God, I wish we'd had this professor. And then some people are like, I had Professor Garrity. He's the most amazing professor. And the point is simply that when it comes to where to start, whether it's with current research or with primary texts, you got to find somebody you vibe with. You got to find somebody you get energy from. Because if you don't have all the energy to already have figured out the lay of the land so that you can already just go about your business getting it done, well, then you're going to have to get that from someone else. And that's what we call slipstreaming here at Theory Underground. Slipstreaming is what Canadian geese get when they fly in a V. Because the one at the front is doing the most work, and the ones kind of in the back behind that one, they're able to fly along easier the further they are in the back of the V. And eventually the one at the front takes a break and then flies in the back, right? And it's a beautiful thing, and they have a rotation going. They're slipstreaming. Also, race car drivers, they know about slipstreaming. Cyclists who race, they understand slipstreaming. But the Canadian Geeseway is a special one because it's a teamwork thing. It's collaborative. I get something special from having you all get something from this. It is reciprocal, but also like if you've mastered something, like Nance is way ahead of me in understanding functionalism and Nicholas Luhmann. And someday I hope he'll actually be able to teach me Nicholas Luhmann. Mikey's way ahead of me on stuff like Lacan and Zizek and Land. And thanks to him, I get to slipstream. So it's like, yeah, I might be breaking through at the front on something, spearheading some kind of a direction, some line of flight, we might say, like a Deleuzian. But I also get to take breaks like the geese do. So I fly to the back, and then I hitch a ride with Chris Catrone or Todd McGowan or Michael Downs, Benjamin Studebaker, right? That's kind of what we're doing here. And it's part of why I have other professors here. It's not just me with my platform. I bring other professors around so that I can model the student-learner relationship. So I can show you all, I'm not the master of all. Like there's all these things that I don't know about. I'm studying from other people. But in some areas, I'm way ahead, right? In some ways, I'm ahead. Now, I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be there yet. In some ways, I'm only just beginning to really get the lay of the land. But my 10 years that I've put into trying to understand this stuff that has culminated in what I'm about to get into, which is what you currently see on the screen, which is this sort of this rough and ready outline for Soc 101 course that you'll all be getting this deeper dive into. It's not just something that I threw together to, and Mikey kind of already said this, but it's not just something that I threw together because, I'm going to teach a Soc 101 class. No, I'm not just teaching the standard theorists, and I'm also not just teaching them in isolation from one another, and I'm also not just going to put up on the screen, let's use our sociological imagination to think about functionalism versus symbolic interactionism and conflict theory, and then we can put a little feminism on it over here, and then over here we can put a little bit of race theory. No, it's going to be much more integral while simultaneously maintaining these contradictions between these theorists. Like Weber and Durkheim make significant advancements in thinking about the social off of the shoulders of those around them at the time. And those advancements are in some ways a genuine challenge for a vulgar Marxism, right? Or for any social change theorist, right? Part of what they're getting at, actually, it's a real intervention, right? It's not just an add-on, and it's not a simple negation. Anyway, you want to slipstream people who've spent a lot of time doing this. And what I was trying to say is it's not just that I've spent a lot of time thinking about these thinkers and how they go together and contradict. It's more importantly that I've spent the last 10 years trying to figure out how to communicate these ideas, not just to freshmen in a college classroom, which you get to see me do that as well, but more importantly, to the kinds of people I've met along the way as I've worked at all of the different kinds of jobs that I've worked at. I'm not sure how many of you have much of a sense for the kinds of jobs I've worked. But I don't like to stay at a job after I have a problem with a manager, or if I can see that it's not going anywhere and there's a better possibility somewhere else. And so I've actually worked a lot of jobs, and in a lot of cases it required like working somewhere for 2 months and then being like, I'm out of here. And in the process, you know, I started with lawn mowing for neighbors and doing construction for neighbors. And then when I was 16, I worked at a theme park. And then when I was 17, I worked at Pizza Pipeline and Hollywood Video and Schlotsky's Deli and Olive Garden. And then I worked at Gale Contracting Services doing insulation. And then I worked at this place where I was doing drywall. Then I worked at this place where I was doing foundations. And then I did roofing, and I've done painting, and I've done scrapping out construction sites, just breaking things and taking stuff out of the. I'm trying to say I've done a lot of construction, but I've also worked in grocery stores, and I've worked in fast food and slow food, and I've worked in warehouses, and I've worked driving trucks. Okay, I did all of that before I went to college, and ever since I read A Strange Labor, and I got kind of like super like, yeah, working class. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I care about that, which was very early in my college career. The constant thing I've thought about is like, how do you take any of this stuff back to the people home in your life, right? And for me, I've maintained relationships with a handful of past coworkers who have now turned into friends or friendships for over 15 years. I've still got friends from back in the music scene days. I've still got friends from back when I was partying. I've still got friends. Why does that matter? It means I care about not just, I don't maintain these relationships just so I can teach them theory. I don't teach them theory. I maintain these relationships so I can continue to see the world through their eyes. They teach me, I don't teach them, right? That maybe someday I will be to the point of advancement where I could actually write a book to them, and it would be something that they wouldn't be wasting their time to read. The Time Energy book was my first real stab in that direction as an exercise in being able to write something more popular, but it's still not a popular book, and I didn't write it as such, and I say so in the preface. All of this is just to say, you want to find somebody who spends a lot of time in the field, and preferably that's a person who at the same time who cares about being able to communicate with this stuff outside of like a niche online consumer demographic constellation of friends. And Mikey and I, the majority of our conversations are not just, oh, I'm so interested in this thinker, and what do you think that thinker thinks, and what do you think that they're saying here, but also like, how would you explain this? How would you explain this? Our friendship of over 8 years at this point is a friendship based around pedagogy, which is to say teaching practices and trying to see if we can understand a concept by talking about it in a lot of different ways. So that's what my real skill set is, right? And I think that some people, like Mikey was pointing out at the beginning of this stream, they take it at face value. They hear me speaking in simple terms, and so they take me to be a simpleton, because they have never really thought seriously about speaking to freshmen, speaking to juniors, speaking to high school dropouts working with earbuds who have no entry point into the field, and at the same time being in dialogue with people who are doing current research. So, current research and the major debates that make up these fields today versus then will be something that is an ongoing theme here in this course. I'm going to do a quick rundown of this table of contents, but I realized actually, Anne, before we do the table of contents, if you could, in a second here, scroll down to the first of the screenshots. I'm actually going to read a couple other things, because I hate marketing, I hate advertising, I hate trying to recruit people. As Mikey said, I'm much better at hyping other people up than hyping myself, but I do need people to know that this is starting and this is going to be really good. And there's no better place or time to jump in than right now. If you've been wondering about getting involved at Theory Underground, now's the time. Mikey's seminar is absolutely amazing. It's going to give you the basis in psychoanalysis and the major debate of our current theory scene, this fissure between, on the one side, the CCRU, and on the other side, the Slovenian school. But what I'm going to bring is thinking about things socially, talking about where academia comes from, talking about where it currently is at, talking about its goods and its bads then and now. That's what I'll be doing. And I'll be doing that for an audience of freshmen and juniors at the university, at a state university. At the same time that I'm able to do this, let's go into the deep end. Let's really get into the text. And one of the things that I want to make sure I don't forget to touch on is the actual text themselves, because there's a great comment here in the live chat side of things. Who was it that said that? Somebody said, I read the PDFs this morning. And so I wanted to shout that person out. Was it Kolith's Mindscape? Let's see. Control. Find. Yeah, okay, it was. It said, looked at and mostly read the 2 PDFs from the Discord this morning. Fantastic. Well, that was An Ancient Antagonism, a section of Fear of Falling by Barbara Ehrenreich, and it's a heavily abridged selection of excerpts from Frederick Engels's The Condition of the English Working Class. And so the fact that you read those this morning is absolutely amazing. I couldn't be happier. That just makes me feel absolutely thrilled to hear. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to hear that somebody actually did that reading. It's tight. It's tight, tight, tight. All right, Anne, if you could scroll down here, we're going to look at the first of these screenshots. So I asked permission from these people to go ahead and share this on stream. This is Mandy. Mandy's been a subscriber for a long time, one of our longest time subscribers of the ongoing research seminar that I've been doing with Anne, which, by the way, I forgot to kind of mention. Obviously, this is all happening. These deep dives with Dave are like this new part of what Anne and I are already doing together. Right? We've been doing these things together. You might have seen some of that stuff for free on the public side, but it's something that the subscribers, the TU subscribers for the ongoing research, they have access to that. And so Mandy loves to use emojis. I think that's the first thing that you'll probably notice. And it was awesome. Or it is awesome. I love it. I think it's great because people who use emojis make my heart happy for some weird reason. But anyway, she's and I'm not going to sit here and say it's a smiley face, and then it's a little duck, and then it's a little halo person, and then it's a little sun and a little planet and a little muscle strength muscle. No, I'm not going to do that every time she's got emojis. Just understand, for those people listening only, there's a lot of emojis throughout this. Anyway, she said, I'm listening to the audiobook for Time Energy right now. Wow, Nance is super, super fantastic reading this. And just so you all know, Nance is absolutely an amazing narrator. And the fact that he narrated Time Energy, and you can get that on Audible, is just really, really, really cool. And if you've been around Theory Underground for long, the chances are you enjoy his voice. Well, his voice in my mind, I don't know. It's like my voice gets in the way of my mind and being able to hear what I'm actually saying. So hear what I want you to think about through Nance's voice. It's so much better. It's so much better. Anyway, exhaustion is the spirit of our age. In chapter numero uno, golden. Ooh, where is your t-shirt division at? What a quote. Oh, that needs to be one. And it's true. We actually have a forum on the Discord just for t-shirt ideas because we will have some merch eventually. She said, yeah, you know, I did overlook this book initially because the title didn't seem to be abstruse enough, right? I mean, someone called me a fascist for using popular language in the title. I have a giant, reflection from this person trashing the book because the title is Time Energy, Why You Have No Time or Energy, and they just thought that that was so pedestrian and stupid and populist and reactionary, like that I was using this non-abstruse title. Well, what Mandy's saying here is that she kind of overlooked the book because of its basic title, right? This is what I'm getting at when I'm saying that people underestimate something if they don't know what's going on and they think oh, Dave just thinks simple thoughts. No, I put a lot of thought into communicating in a clear and precise way with people from all walks of life, at least in my background of walks of life. Anyway, she said, yeah, you know, I did overlook this book initially because the title didn't seem to be abstruse enough. And now I'm like, wait, hold on. Holy shit. What is in here? Wait, this is actually crucial and amazing. This can be used as a basic unit of both thinking, yet also unit of bargaining. Should be at every economics conference of the future. So, I mean, to me, that's like the highest praise ever. Mandy is a sort of archetypical working class woman who is like the kind of underground theorist who comes to our events in person. She drove 3 hours to see us in Kansas City, Missouri, at Prospero's bookstore when we did that event with Mikey and Nance, me. It was fire. It was really cool. And the fact that she was there with her dog, her big fat dog, being all sweet, that was awesome. It was a great time. And if you will scroll now, we're going to turn to this question about current research that Wukac brought up. I forget who actually initially brought up that question, but shout out to whoever that was. But that whole thread sort of preempts the reason I have this other screenshot up on the screen. Let's take a look at it. And so I got this email from Shakar, and I get these great kinds of emails from people all the time. And is there like, why is there like little blocks on that image?
It was like that when you uploaded it.
Jeez Louise, that's not how it's supposed to be at all. I'm just going to go ahead and read the actual version. I'll read it from my screen here. You all just have to trust me that I'm telling you what's behind the stuff that's blocking it. I don't know. I think something must have been happening when I screenshotted it, like some other kind of graphic on my phone or something. Shakar says, hello, Dave. I hope you and Anne... Okay, he said Anna. Usually people say Anne with an E. Both of those are wrong. It's just Anne with an A and 2 N's. Anne. Anyway, I hope you and Anne are doing well. First of all, I'd like to thank you for all the hard work you have put into building Theory Underground. It has been immensely beneficial to learn more about the things that I have always wanted to learn. That being said, I am writing to seek advice on pursuing a master's degree. I currently live in India and work for a think tank. I have a STEM background. Remember, folks, science, technology, engineering, and math. I have a STEM background, but I have been fortunate enough to make it into the public policy space. However, it has left me rather unfulfilled in terms of the intellectual/critical inquiry that I thought I would have found here, and it has made me seriously consider moving out of India to do at least a master's in a field related to sociology, philosophy, critical theory, and psychoanalysis. I have been reading theory for at least a couple of years now and hardly find anyone near me to talk about things I think are important. Some colleges in my county offer masters in the fields that I'm interested in, but they mostly require a social science degree, and the graduates from such degrees are mediocre at best. I know TU is a little anti-academia, but if you were to name 5 universities that you think are doing a good job at providing real education, then what would they be? I'm mostly looking at the US, UK, and Germany. Regards. Thanks, Shakar. That's a really great message. And it's one of the kinds of questions that I get frequently at Theory Underground. I asked your permission to read this out over stream because it relates directly to what these deep dives with Dave and this ongoing research seminar with Anne, as well as the ongoing research seminar with Mikey, is ultimately all about, which is getting your basis in these fields at the same time that you come into the habit of using these concepts and thinking about these texts and going back over them again in a community with other people who are also all about that and are less interested in everyone has to say the right thing about these things, but just more interested in like, okay, but what do these things actually say? You can figure out like how that benefits your career later, but ultimately what we're doing with the ongoing research side of things is giving you that basis and the ability to have like these ongoing relationships or conversations with other people who are doing that kind of work. And if you'll take it back up to the table of contents, everything I said a little bit ago about the current research and primary texts gets at it in some way. I'll say for now is like I'm always looking at University of New Mexico and Duquesne University as two amazing universities. But then there's other just like individuals. Like I would love to go study under Ian Hacking. You know, I forget what university it is, but I think it might be in Toronto. But you know, the European Graduate School would be fantastic. It's not exactly in Germany or the UK, but it's close enough. But I am interested, like, okay, if I was interested in political philosophy, I'd go to Cambridge, thanks to Benjamin Studebaker and telling us all about that. Like, it's absolutely amazing what they are doing there. But I'm more interested in hearing what other people's answers to those questions are going to be. And for now, just saying, wherever you go and whatever you do, you're going to want a place where you can just attend like lectures that assume you haven't done the reading and that you really just want to get a sort of overview and basis in the field and sort of slipstream people who are doing all of those things at the same time. And that's what we're here for. That's what Theory Underground is for. And so, you know, we're ultimately focusing on workers with earbuds who are getting into theory. But if you are a disaffected postdoc or postgrad, or if you're thinking about going to grad school, chances are like you need some place for some kind of, as we say, Marxian spiritual nourishment, right? Spiritual nourishment being like the lectures you go to in the evening, right? Because in the Grundrisse, Marx says that the difference between the worker and the slave is that during the good times in capitalism, the worker can at least attend lectures in the evening and educate his own children, right? And so in Estranged Labor, which was much earlier in his career, he had talked about the importance of being able to digest reality, understand it better through the sciences and the arts. He calls this spiritual nourishment. And of course, the word for spirit in this case is Geist. But he has this idea of like, yeah, no, the dream is being able to go to lectures in the evening. Well, you don't have time, energy for that. You wouldn't, even if there was a place in town that was going to be teaching the stuff that you would want, you wouldn't be able to get there on time. But that's why we do what we do at Theory Underground. We have this place that you can come to where we can all get together and you can slipstream off of some people who are doing this stuff full time. We're sharing our energy with you. We're sharing our time with you. And insofar as we keep putting out long form content that is supercharged with a certain kind of high octane and hopefully rigorous effort through time, making it repeatable that you can listen to and then re-listen to later on demand, it actually makes it so that you might not have time energy. You don't have large energy infused repeatable blocks of reliable time between us. But what you do have are these sort of tools and this kind of content that is a sort of simulation of a certain kind of time energetic research, teaching, and work. And in that sense, it might be the best thing you can get in terms of time energy right now. A lot of people say, oh, I don't have time energy for that. Okay, well then you're fucked. Bye. In the meantime, I'm doing stuff with people like Mandy. I'm doing stuff with people like Ian. I'm doing stuff with people like Nance, people who are working class people who don't have time energy for anything, who don't have money for anything, and they are still somehow able to participate just enough to be able to kind of immerse themselves over time in these fields. They're somehow able to make it work. And if you can't at your current job, you might do as I've done many a times and find a different job. All right, with that said, let's go over this list here. From class and capital to marginalized and oppressed groups to the PMCification of every liberation struggle. To what is sociology, how to do sociology, and theorizing sociology as a science. These first two should have asterisks at the top, at the beginning, as well as the ones at the bottom that have asterisks. The point of the asterisk is that it's a constant theme of the entire course. Thanks, Ann. It's a constant theme of the entire course, which is to say there are certain weeks where I focus on something specific, but the ones with the asterisk, it's a theme that I'm going to keep coming back to, and maybe it'll get a dedicated week, but it is a constant theme. So anthropology versus sociology is at the bottom, one of those sort of timeless questions that we're not going to leave. We're going to keep coming back to it. So is capital. So is the family. So is antidotes to the PMC mode. Antidotes to the PMC mode is one of my favorite things about this course. Time energy, labor power versus Scole, OTM, active leisure. One of my favorites as well. But those are all with the asterisk, meaning it's nonlinear. I'll be incorporating those throughout the course of this series. But the slightly more linear or chronological approach is to first do early bourgeois sociology and the working class, class war, capitalism, and Marx as critical social theory. You have to understand early bourgeois sociology, and you have to understand the working class movements and that gave rise to the Marxism that was itself a critique of the left at the time. It was a critique of socialism at the time, right? And understanding this as critical social theory. Not just understanding Marx as critical social theory, but understanding capitalism as a form of critical social theory, right? Nick Land's very good for thinking about capitalism as an actual form of critical social theory. Then we get into early non-Marxist sociologists, post-Marxist sociology. You know, that would include, obviously, Durkheim and Weber, but it's also going to include W.E.B. Du Bois and Frantz Fanon. But to understand what they're doing, after getting your sort of basic sort of sense for the main non-Marxist sociologists, the early ones, Auguste Comte, would have been actually at that earlier week, early bourgeois sociology, you know, Harriet Martinet or whatever her name is, early bourgeois sociology, right? The author of Democracy in America, I always forget his name. Tocqueville. It's Tocqueville. De Tocqueville. He's part of early bourgeois sociology, right? So there you have to it's great to approach sociology in threes, right? And so if you're just thinking about, okay, well, prior to Marx, what's going on, and you just need three names, Marionette, I think is her name. Let me just double check and click on it. Martineau. No, sorry, Harriet Martineau. So Harriet Martineau, Auguste Comte, and de Tocqueville. If you can remember those three names, you're already ahead of most people. Then, of course, you've got the working class, class war, capitalism, Marx as critical social theory. Marx and Engels. That's a great place to start, is Marx and Engels. Just get the basics of their works. Then you got the early non-Marxist sociology. If you could just get the basics of Durkheim and Weber, you're going to be off to a wonderful start. But then, of course, you've got worldview Marxism. Now, that's another thing altogether. You've got Rosa Luxemburg. You've got Karl Kautsky, you've got Vladimir Lenin, and ultimately you really do have to spend time with Trotsky and Stalin to understand what worldview Marxism becomes as a sort of religion. Because if you don't understand that and you just, I just like Marx, then you're not going to really understand what Marxists are up to. And you actually have to understand what Marxists are up to understand what social theorists are up to, because every social theorist ever since the time of Marx, has been surrounded by Marxists. You cannot study sociology. You cannot be Talcott Parsons or Irving Goffman or Pierre Bourdieu or Michel Foucault or Theodore Adorno without being surrounded by people who are going to call you a sock dem and call you a revisionist and call you a counter-revolutionary because you're not signing off on their little whatever they're doing in the moment, right? Every great social theorist sees Marxism's like an entity in the room with them. to understand every great social theorist, you don't just need to understand the working class war, capitalism, and Marxist critical social theory. You actually have to understand what worldview Marxism became as an entity in the room with people, something that they actually had to be in dialogue with. And in most cases, like Bourdieu, arguing against in a lot of cases. Sometimes he goes, got to give the devil his due. Marxists are aware of this thing. But then constantly going back to, yeah, but they get this wrong or they get that wrong, right? And so it's like a lot of Marxists will just talk about like there's bourgeois sociology and then there's Marxist sociology. And there's a lot of theorists. I don't think it's fair to call them bourgeois sociologists. And they should be better understood as sort of post-Marxist social theorists. Okay, at least that's the way I'm approaching it. Then you have class meets race in the United States. Okay, that's going to be a really big one. And it's sufficient to just spend a lot of time reading W.E.B. Du Bois, but if you could also read Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington and understand the major debate between W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, if you can understand that one is the archetype of petty bourgeois ideology, whereas the other one is the archetype of radical or at least leftish PMC, then you're going to be able to run with that, right? You want to understand the way that they make up those two sides of the PMC, because the right wing of the PMC is always doing this petty bourgeois rhetoric. Almost always. Neoconservatives are a little different. They can be pretty elitist. But there's sort of this pseudo-populist, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, petty bourgeois ideology that the right-wing PMC likes to do. And nobody talks about this. Nobody approaches it this way, but it's there in the source material. I just tease it out and I make it clear. Okay. And so that's one of the major themes that you'll get a lot from in the course of things. But also Theodore W. Allen, The Invention of the White Race, Judith Stein, The Political Economy of Racism in the United States, as I was referencing earlier, Dr. Adolph Reed Jr., Jim Crow, Then and Now, or the Color Line, Then and Now. Amazing stuff, man. There's so much really important stuff here that you actually have to understand. And then you get into class versus the second sex. This is the woman question, right? This is where you get into Simone de Beauvoir, Sylvia Federici, Shulamith Firestone, Luce Irigaray. And of course, well, it doesn't matter. I'm leaving her out for now anyway. It doesn't. So basically, that's the main ones that I'm going to be focusing on in this course. Now, of course, for Sociology 101 class with a bunch of students who aren't going to be able to do all of those readings, I actually have to give like the sort of zoomed out, 1,000 miles from the trees, let's just talk about the forest at this, at this level of, broad strokes. But with you all, I get to dive in the deep end. We actually get to spend weeks on these different thinkers and then coming back to them. We do an overview, then we focus on some other stuff, very ADHD style, and then we come back, and it's the repetition that brings the kind of comprehension that can only come through retroversion, as I already unpacked earlier. By the way, OG Rose, I don't know if you're still in the chat or not, but if you can hop into the Zoom call, I'm really excited to hear from you. I was actually going to say something about the paranoid way of doing sociology versus the sociology of trade-offs. If you want to actually pop in here and say something about that towards the end of this session, I just want you to know that you're welcome. But otherwise,
He did have to leave. He left a little bit ago.
He left. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very all about the paranoid approach. He's very about this trade-offs approach, but I'm not going without the trade-offs approach. I do believe in the trade-offs approach. I'll just say that for now. Go read Belonging Again, volumes 1 and 2, if you want to kind of get a sense for his approach, which is very different. But I do think that we need this paranoid approach. And I would never trust or want to spend any time wasting time with fuckboys on the internet who aren't down to sit with and understand the sort of class approach, who aren't going to... I've realized over the course of things that because of some of the collaborations that I've done, I've actually ended up surrounding myself, not with a lot, but a couple of fuckboy rich kids who don't take time energy theory seriously. They don't take this PMC analysis seriously. They don't think structurally. They don't think systemically. And then what they like about us is that we don't do this whole like check your privilege discourse. We don't do that. But I don't want to be surrounded by such people. And so this focus on trade-offs and how every kind of solution that can possibly be brought to any kind of social crisis brings trade-offs. There's always going to be new problems. As Paulo Virilio says, the invention of the ship invents the shipwreck. That's important. But it loses its power on an audience of people who never tarried with or underwent any kind of subjective destitution because of understanding or working through the source material of these more paranoid approaches that look at power, injustice, exploitation, etc. Okay, but you know what? It's one thing to talk about class versus the woman problem, or talking about the women as a class, which is actually a big thing that people like Shulamith Firestone in The Dialectic of Sex is doing. She's saying, look at what Engels did. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to do it with women. It's literally the way the right wing talks about it, cultural Marxism at its finest. But it's actually worth reading. You should take it seriously. You should think about that problem of women being a class apart. In this, not in the strict Marxist sense of class, but in the sense of groups with opposed interests constitute classes. Well, that's not this Marxist sense for the term, obviously, but it is a radical feminist approach. And W.E.B. Du Bois, the most important Black sociologist of all time, he also does the same thing with race. You can disagree with him, but you should probably spend some time thinking about it very seriously, because when he says that the 20th century is the century of the color line, he means it's not the working class labor line. You have to sit with that. You have to think about it. You don't have to assimilate that into some progressive PMC leftoid worldview or agenda today. But you do have to sit with it if you want to be a genuine social theorist in the 21st century. You have to sit with it. You have to try to think it through. Okay? Well, what I do for race and what I do for sex, I will also be playing out through the developing world, third world, imperialism, colonialism, talking about Frantz Fanon, talking about Vandana Shiva, bringing in a case study in Indonesia from the book The Jakarta Method, as well as Neocolonialism, The Last Stage of Imperialism by Kwame Nkrumah. Absolutely important. You need to have at least the 30,000-foot view of this. You don't have to read every one of these books, but you need to know that they exist. You need to know what they're good for. You need to know how they inform my general approach to thinking about social theory so that you can have your own informed approach that you modify, that you change eventually, and that you make your own. That's what we're trying to get to. The failures of worldview Marxism, guys. So, after talking about race, sex, third world, we get into the failures of worldview Marxism itself. Now, I mean, from the standpoint of race, sex, and third worldism, standard worldview Marxism already failed. It failed to think the woman question. It failed to think the race question. Obviously, from an orthodox standpoint, someone like Swolitariat would easily be able to show, no, it didn't fail at this. It actually took this very seriously. It was just these petty bourgeois intellectuals who didn't want to give the devil his due and get behind the movement at the time. Considering the fact that that movement was Stalinism and you're in the third world, or you're a first world professional or managerial woman going to college, it probably didn't speak to you much, right? So they've got a grain of truth going for them there, the Orthodox Marxists do. But there's other stuff that Orthodox Marxists don't see or don't understand. And I always come back to Marxism when I'm doing sociology and not anarchism, because even though anarchism is very important for social change movements and the assumptions people have in these things, when people get serious and structural and large-scale structural broad-based change that would emancipate everybody, they always have to, if they don't become Marxists, they end up having conversations with Marxists. And so I assume an audience of people who are putting their big kid pants on, they're actually like, okay, let's get serious now. Well, a lot of people who say let's get serious now, they go start watching Hawes, or they go do the platypus thing, or they join the IMT, or the CPUSA, or the PSL, or one of the class factions of the DSA. Right? Don't worry about all the acronyms. I hate when leftists just rattle off a bunch of acronyms. Point is that they're all dead ends. They're all just book groups. except for platypus, which is, I say except for platypus because they've got Catrone. And the Catrone pill is something I want you all to take through Intro to Marxism in October here at Theory Underground. But outside of that, it's a bunch of book groups. And that's not that serious. It's all about electoral politics and trying to push Biden left, or now Harris, I guess. But the failures of worldview Marxism, I'll be tarrying with Michael Heinrich, Moish Pistone, and Paul Maddock, three people who do not have solutions, who are often called SOCDEMs, who maybe in some ways they are, but in various ways they're getting at something that traditional worldview Marxism absolutely failed to comprehend. There's a lot of other texts I want to draw from. We'll see. That's halfway through the semester, whatever. We'll get to it. But how the U.S. won hegemony, the media, how the media inverts base/superstructure, that's going to be a really, really important one. Okay? That one's really important because it's also part of the failures of worldview Marxism, but it's also just part of how things change, right? But I'm not just like putting these words into Marshall McLuhan's mouth. Speaking of, Ian said, it's great when you wave the book around. Well, in Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan, someone who Doug Lane said, well, he's just a bourgeois thinker. He said that at our event with him in Portland. No, he's not just a bourgeois thinker. He's actually critiquing Marxism. He mentions Marx a couple of times, and he says that the relations between base and superstructure have inverted thanks to the medium. How is that possible? What does that mean? Actually, Durkheim and Weber show ways in which the superstructure can be more causally primary than the base. The base will set the horizon of possibilities in which the superstructure can play, but the superstructure can do things because it exists in time and it's able to project and it's able to get humans excited about things and it's able to work its magic on people's imaginations. And ultimately, when the media apparatuses themselves change, where things come from, though it matters, all of a sudden it's not the most important thing in various ways in specific domains. What are those ways? What are those domains? We'll get into it, but that'll be a great place to talk about the rise of the intelligence apparatuses in the military industrial complex. And we'll talk about Surveillance Valley and simulacra and simulation and understanding media and James C. Scott, Seeing Like a State, as well as maybe more Vince Bevins, the Jakarta Method, as well as a bunch of other books. And then the rise of the professional managerial class, right? So all of that, and then we'll talk about the rise of the professional managerial class, even though it comes about prior to the woman question, the race question, the third world question. It comes about at the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century. And that's where we have to read W.E.B. Du Bois' The Talented Tenth. And we have to read Frederick Winslow Taylor on the principles of scientific management, where he's as clear as possible trying to explain to people like Woodrow Wilson, the first progressive president. He's trying to say, look, if we're going to create interclass harmony between the workers and the rulers, then we need a new strata, a new function, a new role in the reproduction of the status quo. And we actually need like kind-hearted, principled professionals and managers who have a pedigree and training and certification, who are ultimately bought into the system. And whether they're radical or not, like whether they're like W.E.B. Du Bois, radical, or they're more like Booker T. Washington, either way, they're going to serve a certain function in reifying this division between those who are supposed to work with their hands and those who are supposed to think and lead. At the time, it was called for in a lot of ways. And people think about the 1930s as the peak of working class culture in the United States. Yeah, well, because the U.S. government was scared of Soviet Russia. But between 1905 and the early 1930s, the professional managerial class, especially Frederick Winslow Taylor, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Edward Bernays, solidify a certain approach that gets adopted everywhere. And it's why we see this dramatic rise in these professions and their influence. And it has to be understood as something intentional, planned, and as a direct response against working class organizing and the successes, not just the failures and horrors, of the Soviet Union. And then, of course, there's The Managerial Revolution by James Burnham. That's a sort of right-wing, neoconservative take on the situation. He's an ex-Trotskyist. Then you got Andre Gore's Farewell to the Working Class. This is the book that Daniel Tutt just was completely miffed and just couldn't believe that we actually like it or got something from it. He was like, you have to admit that you lost that debate with me. And it wasn't even a debate. We were just sticking up for Andre Gore's. And the fact is Farewell to the Working Class is an amazing book. It's a very important book. And the only reason someone like Tutt can't sit with it and take it seriously is because it's saying, yep, sorry, this working class reductionism that you've hitched your little wagon to isn't the solution that you think it is. Yes, ultimately, still, I care more about the working class than anything else. But that doesn't mean I think that it is the vehicle for change in some kind of like a panacea sense. We also have to then think about how the rise of the professional managerial class turns everything into debates over recognition versus redistribution versus representation. To understand that, you want to go with like the debates between the Martha Nussbaums and Jody Deans and Nancy Frasers of 1970s through 1990s academia. In progressive academia. You got to understand the debates going on there, because that is sort of this PMC realist institutional long march through the institutions approach. So we're gonna get into all of that. And then finally, how institutions construct us. This is absolutely essential. This gets right back to what I was talking about at the very beginning of this stream when I was talking about subjectivization, right? How is a subject made? Well, for that, we'll want to do so many different crucial texts on schooling and institutions like the Deschooling Society, Weapons of Mass Instruction, Discipline and Punish, Louis Althusser's Ideological and Repressive State Apparatuses, Tools of Conviviality, Bourdieu on the social unconscious, drawing out across several of his works. Irving Goffman on asylums, absolutely essential. Herbert Marcuse, One-Dimensional Man. I've also got a bunch of books on bureaucracy I'm sorting through, trying to limit it down to one or two. And then we'll want to bring in The Social Construction of Reality by Peter L. Berger and Luckman. That one is a classic in social theory and social sociology. And Peter L. Berger is an extension of the phenomenological school of sociology. Very, very cool. Very, 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 very cool stuff. And Bourdieu's in dialogue with Berger, as well as others who were pioneering that field, right? This sort of post-Husserlian endeavor. It's very, very cool stuff. And the thing is, I'm not teaching anything that I don't want to teach. Everything that I'm teaching is something that I absolutely love. This is the coolest shit on the internet right now. For me, there's nothing I would rather be watching. And then we got to talk about the fall of the professional managerial class, right? The fall. We normally start with the fall and sort of like, oh, virtue hoarders, look, they're all a bunch of like PMCs, blah, 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 blah. And it's like this sort of polemical, like, fuck the man kind of approach. We don't like that. The one thing that that fellow said in the email earlier that I kind of want to, I don't know. We're not anti-academia. We're not even anti-PMC. But there was a time when it had standards and a sense of responsibility that came with these occupations, these higher callings, and a time when it just became this sort of careerist, insular, specialist, elitist sort of thing. And so, of course, you know, there's the basic texts like Listen, Liberal, and Virtue Hoarders, but we're also going to go deeper. We're going to go to source material that all the critics of this general thesis underestimate, don't take seriously, don't read, right? There was that amazing moment when Ben Burgess in LA was like trying to problematize our use of the PMC by saying, well, there's teachers and nurses and they would count as well. And we're like, yeah, Ehrenreich, I was like, did you read the professional managerial class like piece by Barbara Ehrenreich? And he's like, a long time ago. And I was like, she talks about this. She addresses this. This is not a problem. This is just part of the analysis. There are these gray areas and it gets messy. But if you don't understand their role in the reproduction and reification of this division between the expert class and the undeserving, unskilled wage earner class, if you don't understand their role in that, like you're not doing class analysis in the 21st century. You're just not on the wavelength. Like you got to get on the wavelength. And to do that, you're going to have to read a woman. You're gonna have to read a woman. You're gonna have to take her seriously, And before writing her off, by problematizing her for saying things that she already preempted, you'll actually have to sit with it and think about it instead of just dropping your hot takes all over it and smearing your shit on the walls when we're trying to fucking do something serious for the big kids. And then On Bullshit Jobs, David Graeber, fantastic, also kind of polemical, but just really fun book. And then Neo-Feudalism, this is very popular right now with Yanis Varoufakis. The last four sections: PMC-led social change, the critique of PMC-led social change, Pierre Bourdieu as the most important critic of sociology, anthropology, Marxism, and the PMC, and then finally the post-class fractured mass and duopoly, which is where we're going to get into Baudrillard, D&G, but also some contemporary controversial ladies like Angela Nagel and Amberly Frost, as well as, of course, a favorite from critical media theory when we did it, Matt Taibbi's Hate Inc. And so this is all essential if you want to make change in the world today, right? But the one that doesn't speak for itself that I said we would be touching on throughout all of this is the antidotes to the PMC mode, right? I'm assuming people who come into sociology because they want to be activists on the side that's the university side, because sociology is advertised as a way to make social change. Well, if you want to make social change, you got to understand what you're a part of, what you are reproducing in a class society. And to do that, you're going to want to understand some certain things like ressentiment. We'll probably focus on the genealogy of morals by Friedrich Nietzsche. Totalization. We'll want to talk about totality and infinity, Emmanuel Levinas. Symbolic capital. We'll want to talk about Pierre Bourdieu and the way that saying, well, I have nothing to gain from this, or, I don't really know what I'm talking about, is actually a way of effacing you that sets you up even better, and you get symbolic capital by playing these disavowal games. Like, I'm not paid to do this. I don't take money to talk about this thing. By doing that, you get symbolic capital. And by getting symbolic capital, it builds your social and your cultural capital. If you don't understand that and you're an activist, every blue collar worker understands it in their gut and they're disgusted by it, okay? Every fucking one gets it at a certain level. They can see, and they might use right-wing ways of saying it, like it's virtue signaling or what. No, they're just trying to find words to talk about something that the greatest sociologist of all time, arguably, was talking about when he was talking about symbolic capital, right? But activists today are in a mode of ressentiment. They are totalizing. They're getting symbolic capital. They're also getting off on the movement. They're getting off on the scapegoating. They're getting off on the polarization and division. They're getting off on putting it onto individuals, even though they say that what they care about is the structural. And that's where we have to think about jouissance and death drive and Jacques Lacan. And then finally, you have to understand sign value through Baudrillard and what it means to be like sort of in this spectacle where it's all about sign value. Without these kinds of scathing critiques, and without the kind of lectures that I'm going to be able to give both my students at Soch 101 and you all here on the back end at Theory Underground for the subscriber base, without that, and without that becoming eventually a sort of mainstream and like generalized assortment of tools in the toolkit of any people who are thinking about the social, much less trying to change it, I think we're fucked. And the reason the family and capital are on here, well, capital is going to be a theme throughout the whole thing. And it's not just Capital Volumes 1 through 3 and the Grundrisse and Wage, Labor, and Capital and Value, Price, and Profit and the Political and Economic Manuscripts of 1844, or the extensions like Rosa Luxemburg's The Accumulation of Capital or Rudolf Hilferding's Finance Capital, or the critique of those books called The Law of Accumulation by Heinrich Grossman, or the critiques of his book. But no, it's all of that. And if you don't have the time and energy to do that, that's why I do what I do. I do that. And then I try to make it easy for you to kind of get a basic lay of the land so that later, when you do have the motivation to do something, you know where to point that motivation and not just scroll TikTok or doom scroll Instagram, right? It's so that I can do that. But it's not just Marx and extensions of that project, but also insider critiques and outsider critiques. Outsider critiques, you actually have to know Baum-Borwerk and Ludwig von Mises and F.A. Hayek. You actually have to know them, right? That's something Benjamin Studebaker was talking about in his Introduction to Political Philosophy. The Betrayal of Marx by Frederick Bender. We're going to spend some time thinking about these insider critiques by people who got disenchanted by the movement. And this is different than these critiques of worldview Marxism. right? At the level of critiquing standard worldview Marxism and the way it gets picked up, you're just critiquing Haas, right? You're just critiquing the mega communists, or I don't know, the Jacobin socialists. Like, that's who you're critiquing. If you just stay at the level of oh, well, what was worldview Marxism and how did it fall apart and what changed? And no, but we also want to think about the actual critique of political economy and what it means to be extensions of that project here, now, today. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and just roll the PSA. We'll be back in a couple minutes, and I'll be on the whiteboard going over some people's questions. We've got some people in the chat here on the Zoom side. I want to hear what you guys have to say. And there's a couple other things that I'll want to touch on. We'll probably be another 45 minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and just roll this as a commercial break, and we'll be right back after this. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to smash the like button and all of that stuff. But this PSA is a big shout out for Mikey's seminar, and also the one that I'm talking about, the ongoing Snellgrove McKerracher synthesis research seminar that I'm doing with Anne, my wife. That one is how the people get access to these deep dives that I'll be doing for this class, and how you get access to the lectures that I'm giving at the university for these students who are getting this fire hose treatment, just getting so much information every day that they come to class. So go ahead. If you're going to sign up this week, today's the day to do it. Let's go.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of the situation that short-circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most important for understanding our current situation: theory of the subject, capital, time-energy theory, critical media theory, CMT, and the most essential critiques necessary for understanding why the theory, ideology, and common sense of influencers left to right misses the mark.
Theory Underground is coming to a city near you. What that has meant in the last year is traveling across the United States, into Canada, and then all over Europe to promote our books, courses, and ideas related to time energy and underground theory. You've been reading Underground Theory.
I'm a publisher and an editor. I run and review books. Literally, it's my living. This is the best edited collection I've ever read.
Okay, picture this scene. America, early 2021. An Amazon warehouse worker arises from the emerging underground theory internet scene to create spaces for untimely topics and concerns that are too often neglected or kept in isolation today. Joined by a revolving cast of underground theorists, academics, and critics, he establishes what will become Theory Underground, a teaching, research, and publishing platform by and for working-class intellectuals, autodidacts, and academics who want to do more than they're able to do within the confines of academia. That warehouse worker's name is David McKerracher, and his book Time Energy is his first major contribution to the world of theory. It was recently reprinted with a foreword by none other than Slavoj Žižek, who also contributed to Theory Underground's latest book.
My Bible, it's an excellent book.
A collection of essays called Underground Theory.
What you just heard is an excerpt from the Strange Exiles podcast, episode 23, where Bram from Strange Exiles interviewed me and Mikey. For those who don't know, Mikey is the author of the Dangerous Maybe blog. We are publishing one of his books here shortly at Theory Underground. He's also a lecturer at Theory Underground, and he's someone I've been friends and a collaborator with for over 10 years. But most importantly for you all, he's a fantastic lecturer, and it's a crime that he has to do wage labor right now. One of the long-term goals of Theory Underground has been now for a couple of years to hashtag free Mikey. That is something that I've been really pushing, but first I had to get freed from wage labor, which was achieved this year. That's right. Thanks to my monthly seminar subscribers, I was able to quit Amazon and do Theory Underground full time. Now I'm announcing the next big phase of the plan, which is the Mikey Down Seminar. What monthly subscribers to the Mikey Seminar are paying for is a survey of philosophy, including deep dives into Zizek, Land, Lacan, Baudrillard, Bataille, Lyotard, and ultimately the whole history of philosophy.
We're trying to build like this ongoing seminar, right? And that's what I really like about this thing, where, you know, if I'm teaching a main text, that's something I got to focus on. I got to really, but the seminar thing, we can do this stuff all the time, where we dive deeper into concepts, we dive deeper into certain, you know, sections of books or whatever, and we can really do this nuanced stuff.
I think that there's probably no better way for us to accelerate our learning in these areas than by slipstreaming Mikey. And that has been my belief for years and years and years now. It's official. You're able to help out. You're able to get involved. You're able to benefit directly from liberating him from wage labor. Get on it right now. Do it. Just go. Stop what you're doing. Go click the button, subscribe. This is what you do. Subscribe to him. If you're already signed up for the ongoing Theory Underground seminars, then that's the ones that I do with my wife, Anne. Though that's getting an upgrade, which means that I will be doing one session per month that is just me, and then I will also be doing the ones with Anne, which are a crash course in sociology, anthropology, the social sciences, and ultimately Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, imminently critiquing pop psychology, sociology, self-help, and ultimately the doxa of our time. But if you would like to be a subscriber to both Mikey's seminar and the seminar that the Snellgrove McKerrachers are doing, then the best way is to become a Tier 4 subscriber, or you can be a Tier 2 subscriber to each of us. The reason this matters is because Tier 2 is like pretty much the best bang for your buck. It gives you huge discounts on all of the courses that we do. But if you can't afford it, Tier 4 is amazing because it gives you Tier 3 access at both Mikey's seminar and ours.
Finally, not everybody has time to be part of these ongoing research seminars, and they just want to fund the paid content for the YouTube and podcast. And so thank you so much to our patrons over at Patreon. They're the ones funding all the free stuff, so big thank you to Bert, Marilyn, Carl, Sahil, Zozandra, Nikolai, Darian, Tyler, and Mandeep, and all the other wonderful patron people. Patreon people. And thank you to all the other wonderful Patreon people. Thank you so much to all of you patrons, and also to the special subscribers and the paying subscribers. Oh my god! It's just so awkward. Thank you, Patreon. Thank you, okay. And to all the other wonderful patrons. Thank you so much, all you patrons. And also a special thanks to the subscribers on the YouTube side as well.
Beautiful, and we're back, and I'm getting set up here with the whiteboard, and as I get set up with the whiteboard, I'm going to go ahead and ask first Anne, Artie, and then Nicholas to go, because when we were all just on the back end having a conversation while you on the live streaming side were all watching that commercial, we were talking like who wants to share out about what, and yeah, so I'm excited to give them this opportunity. So let's start with Anne.
Yes, I first want to give myself all the credit for getting you this teaching job. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, the chair of the sociology department reached out to me initially saying, "Hey, I've got a couple of classes that I still need professors for next semester. Do you want to teach?" And I was all set up to be done with the university for good. Not that like, oh, I hate the university, but just like I wanted to just go into something more regular, kind of 9-to-5 type of job for my income. And then I got offered to teach some classes, and I was like, oh, that's really tempting, especially because I don't have a master's degree, and that's hard to be like an adjunct and teach classes without a master's degree. But she's like, "Hey, you're ready." And then she still needed some instructors, and I said, "Well, hey, I think Dave would probably like to teach a class too if you've got any extras." And so that's how we kind of got in to the system from being discussion group leaders the last semester. And it was funny, the first thing I said when I was like, oh, I'm going to be teaching some sociology classes. And my class is, it's still a 100 level class, but it's sociological communication. So it's kind of a synthesis of sociology and communication. But the cool thing is that professors can do kind of anything they want in that class. I mean, you can do anything you want in terms of like the content. Like Dave could just be teaching from a textbook, but obviously he's doing a bit more of a rigorous like historical approach. For the Soc 122 class that I'm teaching, there are professors who are focusing more like heavily on propaganda and the media only. There's some that are just doing kind of a more communication focused because they're communication teachers as well. And then there's some that are doing the like power hierarchy anti-racism lens through that. But yeah, the first thing I said was, "Ooh, a sociology class. I'm actually going to teach sociology." Because like in my experience being a sociology student, we had like one class where we were actually encountering just some of these sociologists. It's like they kind of introduce you to the names Marx, Weber, Durkheim, Du Bois, in your Soc 101. And then I took a class that was like important social theorists, but that was still like pretty surface level. I don't think we actually read any primary texts. I could be wrong. We just had a textbook. And so yeah, Dave and I, in developing our courses together, we've just been excited to actually like bring some sociology into this sociology department while struggling to, you know, find our position and voice and tell, you know, this kind of full picture of the developments of sociology and all these different lenses through class and the PMC. And like I'll be going into a lot more like media and propaganda and doing some critical media theory approach to my class, as it's a communication class also. So on the one hand, we're like, oh wow, we want to be as rigorous as we can be for a 100 level class. And so that's been fun to develop together. Just, oh, how are we going to teach this? How are we going to bring in this person and Baudrillard, and like just yeah, throwing all these concepts at these students, not throwing them at them, but giving them an introduction into like actually rigorous, meaningful material rather than treating them like children who just have to sit and read a textbook. That's been like the one challenge and exciting thing. And then the other challenge has just been like navigating a sociology department that is like most sociology departments in the West, in the United States, which is just very, very progressive, arguably too progressive. Everything's white supremacy. That's all they care about is battling white supremacy and being anti-racist, which is like a legit lens of sociology if you're studying race and racism, but that's all anyone in the department cares about. And so we're also just coming in like with this different perspective where we're like, well, yeah, that's not our main focus, and we think that there are more pressing issues facing society. And so navigating that and like trying to be our, you know, our authentic selves, as authentic as we can be within the department and within the space, has been its own challenge, and especially challenging for me. But that was just all to give some context as to like why we're even teaching these classes in the first place, what our approach is, and kind of how we're challenging and countering our own experience at this state university, which I think for both of us, and even I can like hopefully speak for you here a little bit, but your like master's program wasn't even that rigorous either. And so we're challenging that, and we were talking kind of behind the scenes, and I was just saying, I'm seeing everyone's chat, like people's comments in the live chat saying, wow, man, I wish I had a class like this at college. And I'm like, isn't that sad that this is not common? Like that it's more common to have kind of boring textbook classes that don't excite us or that don't have like a very knowledgeable, passionate instructor. And that just led to like Artie starting to say something. So I'll let them
Yeah, okay.
Take over. Yeah.
So I was basically just describing my experience in like an old institution, and it still is like sort of applicable to like what's going on in the institution that I'm in right now. But I'll describe what what happened in the ethics course. So we literally did not have to read any primary like authors, right? She just gave us the lecture, and she expected us to be able to just magically understand the material without ever actually coming prepared for it or even knowing these figures. Like like philosophy, like they had like a small philosophy department, but like literally nobody knew any of these ideas. It's like, how are you going to even be able to understand what the hell nothingness means for Sartre when you don't even have like a remote understanding of the distinction between being in itself and being for itself? So like conceptually, this is necessarily going to fuck your students over. Like it's just like it doesn't really make sense. And like the 300 ethics score, you didn't even have to write you did have to write an essay, but like, you could literally write anything. And like the presentations, like you could clearly see that like what he gave us was not enough to actually be able to apply it concretely to our lives and actually see how ethical theories work out. Like this is not enough content. It's like, well, we only have your lecture, and if we don't go to the lecture because we have other familial situations, well, guess what? You're just screwed out of like all that material, and you don't know if the student right next to you or like one of your friends actually like actually took good enough amount of notes to actually make sense of it, because like most of the time like you don't have anything to bounce back off. So it's like this the first time you actually read it, you hear about it, it's like, okay, like I can really get this like abstractly. And like she would use jargon found in the book and like not really explain it that well. I'm just like, what the fuck is going on? And like right now I have a 300 like level course, and this is like a state university that only has a 2-page essay. The rest seem to be fine, where it's like, okay, 6-page essay, but like just even generally, we don't actually go into like the book doesn't actually go into any specific figures. You know, you don't actually get like a concrete grounding in the research to see like, oh, if I want to actually learn more about this field and more in depth, that isn't really just like a generalization, I can actually go to this figure. It's not there. So that's just like fairly unfortunate. It's there are some great teachers, obviously. Like my introduction to sociology, like that guy is like solid. Like having conversations with him, the way how he explains it, like he actually expects students to read the material and so on and so forth before they come to class. Like he'll actually give you questions about what's going on in it. And it's just like sometimes people get some anxiety and so on and so forth. But like, yeah, it's better to do it at 100 than 200. All right, that's basically what I have to say.
Thanks, Artie. That's really great. And thank you, both of you, for all that, allowing me to get set up here. I'm about to turn it over to Nicholas as our last subscriber side contribution. But I also just want to say, I want people to know that the resentment we feel is never about the normies in our lives who aren't big geeks for the stuff that we want to study. Like for instance, one of my colleagues in the social department was talking about how she doesn't get like concepts unless she actually like goes somewhere and checks it out for herself. And she's just not really into theory. She's into hands-on stuff. So she's way more into the fieldwork side of things. Well, remember, for us, the definition of normie in the post-class fractured mass is anyone who's not into what I'm into. That's all we're using this term to signify. So I'm a normie for anybody who's really into golf or Land Rovers or D&D or football, right? So I'm a normie to any of them if that's really what they're into. But when I use a term, it's purely relative, right? And so all I'm saying is like a normie to me is the person who's not into the niche things I'm into. I just want people to know the resentment is like when I go and I take a course on something and I'm a big like geek for it and I want to get like really into it, and then it's not really like the opportunity to get really into it. I spent all this money on it. I spent all this time and energy on it. And then we didn't really get to go anywhere with it, and we didn't really get into it. And I felt like, okay, so I just have to do it all myself. Fine. Okay, whatever. All you're going to do is give us excerpts from some handouts from some supposedly current literature, and then you're going to name drop and tell us what some people supposedly said, and we'll never actually get intimate brushes up with primary voices or texts. Okay, fine, I guess. And so there's a resentment that comes from being $60,000 in debt and not having gotten the thing that we were there for, and instead just getting called white supremacist if we didn't just nod along and go with whatever the hell people were saying at the moment with their current definitions for things. And I'm not saying that we were called such things. I'm just saying that that's kind of where it's at. It's like, well, if you don't agree with the current sloganeering of the Democratic Party, you're not going to do well in Soch. That's kind of like the feeling that you get. It's not fully true though. I hope what we're learning is like there's a lot more tolerance and shared, I feel more or less welcome there. We went to a picnic and I felt more or less welcome. If they listened to all my lectures, would they still think, I think they'd still like me. If they listen to everything I've done on this channel, probably at some point they won't like me. Some of them might not like me, but that would be, I would just say, look, it's the internet. We have to be loud and say things and speak simply sometimes. So I just want to kind of like really drive home this point. I don't feel any animosity towards any individuals. It is a larger structural issue where the bar has been lowered for neoliberalized students, which is to say students as consumers, and the lifestyle activism is just a step on their way to this thing. This sets up Nicholas for what he's going to say, but basically the subtext of everything I was talking about is a buzzword, meritocracy. The subtext for all of it is the PMC's role is not just to be this group that makes everybody get along between the ruling and the working class. It's also to help reify the divisions within the post-class fractured mass and to foster a sort of sense of superiority or inferiority amongst and between people on the basis of usually superficial things like identity. But go ahead, Nicholas, and I think your stuff, what you wanted to talk about, probably relates somewhat to that. So,
hey, I'm Nick, and dittoing everybody else who had to believe they were getting something out of this course. I didn't get the typical college experience. Actually, I didn't even go, but it makes me even more excited about this course and what it's offering, because it sounds like a lot of it you're not going to get there necessarily. And sorry if I'm a little shaky, I'm a little nervous because I'm kind of shy, but I wanted to talk about the reading because I wanted to get some more reading done. And so I won't promise I will always get the reading done, but I did get some done for this course because there's a PDF shared, actually 2 PDFs. And I read the one called An Ancient Antagonism. At least that's how it starts. And I was reminded of one of the things Dave said he was going to talk about in the course, which was how institutions construct us. And it makes me think of not just the PMC or how the professional managerial class came about, but also how it constructs worker subjectivity as well. Maybe kind of not a very novel observation, but my thoughts were on the worker's unconscious, because there are several quotes in the piece by workers, such as, "Oh, the professionals, they don't really do anything. We do the real work," and stuff like that. And so that is the surface of perhaps the surface that we can get through quotes. But I'm wondering about if Dave has anything to say about the unconscious aspect that we see through the surface. And this might tie into things that Michael Downs might talk about.
thank you. Yeah, that's really good. All right. And so in the last 20 minutes here, I only have 20 more minutes, so I'm going to kind of rush through some things. I just want to say thanks, Nicholas. And you know what? You're not the only person who's involved here at Theory Underground who feels out of your wavelength or comfort zone when you speak, especially this is on stream. That's a big deal. You didn't even go to college. The first time I public spoke at college, it was the first time I ever did anything in front of a classroom, and because I didn't go through a standard education experience, and so my hands were shaking. I was holding notes and my hands were shaking, and I gave like this lecture that I think probably came off as like very animated, but it was like partially just like that was the only thing I could do with the energy, you know, because I was feeling trembly, and I always had like a huge amount of what is it called? It's not called stage fright. I was going to say speaker's fright. Yeah, stage fright. I had a terrible sense for stage fright. And it was like probably the biggest animating factor in like a few years of my life where I was like, I'm a Christian, you know, because I was in a Christian family. And they were like, well, then get baptized. And I was like, no. And then I wouldn't explain why. And they just couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. Everyone was always like, why don't you get baptized? And I'd just be like, I was too embarrassed to explain that I was too embarrassed to go up in front of everybody. Right? Like I was just so embarrassed. And then sometimes people would put me on the spot, you know, for like these occasions where everybody's getting together and it's a bunch of Christians. And like one time I was put on the spot, Dave, you pray. And everyone lowers their heads. And then like, it was like a really awkward silence. And I feel like it went on for 5 minutes, and people started looking around and looking at me like, what's going on? There's like 20 people there, and my ears were completely red, and I just clammed up, and I literally couldn't say anything, right? So I want that to be in your head. Like, remember, like, it's obviously like, that's much worse what I'm talking about there. And so my fear being much worse means that when I finally decided to go all in and learn how to speak publicly, I really dove in, and I think I took it as seriously as I did because I was so afraid. And not everybody's that afraid, but everybody has a little bit of that, and you never lose it. You know, my aunt at a family reunion a few weeks ago, she said it was the same for me in college, and she said it never goes away. It stays there, and it's alive and well as a sort of anticipation, right? Like the way that I think for the 24 hours before I do anything public, it's always like, it's like, okay, got to get my head in the game here. Anyway, so with that said, yeah, this is interesting because we're between the university and here, and I'm so happy to now be teaching at a social class after taking off 5 years from academia. If I hadn't taken off 5 years from academia and focused on researching what I wanted to research and doing what I wanted to do, which was made possible first at Theory Played through patrons, and then later at Theory Underground thanks to subscribers. If it wasn't for that, it wouldn't be worth shit, this class. It wouldn't be worth shit. I just genuinely think that it would have been some more run-of-the-mill, let's go through functionalism and symbolic interactionism and talk about these different isms and act like they're just these ideas that exist in some field as though they're scientific facts that stand on their own 2 feet, like there's not real powerhouse thinkers who made their mark on history and are in dialogue with one another, and you can actually get to know them and be engaged in that conversation, right? This latter approach, it's a little bit more of a St. John's great books approach, is rare to find in critical theory spaces. It's rare to find in critical theory spaces. Mikey and I keep it alive and well. And for him, it's because he has that background back in the day. He was a Baptist, and you know they would do line-by-line analyses and get super into the text and do cross-referencing and exegesis and hermeneutics. And so he has that. But for me, it's because of some amazing professors that I've had and how I think about how much more valuable their way of teaching is than the way that was this sort of standard PowerPoint presentation where you have someone teaching sociology, they download PowerPoint presentations from Norton.com using a textbook from Norton.com that doesn't have any primary quotations. It's just summaries and little factoids and funny little things. And then it's the quizzes and the exams and all of that is just made by Norton, the textbook company, And they're like, this is learning. We have knowledge to give you, and then we can certify you as a knowledge haver. And if you're really good at taking those tests, you might also be a great thinker. But the fact is if you're really good at taking those tests, all we know is that you're really good at taking those tests. That's all we know objectively, is that you're good at taking tests. You could have gotten A's in every Spanish class you took for 7 years, but you can't speak any Spanish. I would rather be able to speak basic Spanish in real life, talking to actual Mexicans, than have a bunch of A's on some Spanish exams. Now, if you can have both, that's even better, of course. But a lot of us don't have that luxury. Most of us don't have that luxury. And so bringing it back to what Nicholas was talking about, yes, this ancient antagonism between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat becomes the antagonism between the elite college degree haver and the blue-collar worker. Of course, there's other groups in society. There's the lumpen proletariat or the underclass or the precariat, and there's, yes, okay. But when we think about the people with the muscles who make things happen, who are they today? Who is the biggest problem for Democrats when they think about, like, when they're doing their resistance? It's not Trump even. It's Trump followers who are coded as blue collar and petty bourgeois. They're coded that way. They're not necessarily all that way. But it's the sort of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, business having kinds of ex-workers. They saved up their wages, they started their own business, or they went into debt with some bank and they started their own business. That's their role in the middle class. Maybe they have a wife who teaches at the school, but he's got his own little painting company, or or drywall or whatever, or he's a contractor of some sort. That's the petty bourgeois sort of Trump supporter, or you got the truck drivers and the trucker protests and the anti-vax. You've got like these different tendencies, right? Well, the resentment held by the populace against the college having, the college degree having elite, that resentment is not just created by Rush Limbaugh and now Bodini or whoever. Is that his name? I forget. But anyway, it doesn't matter. What? Bambino? We'll say Bambino. It doesn't matter. But the point is like the right-wing talking heads who sow like sort of like anger content. They're not creating the anger out of nothing. There is an objective basis for that resentment, and it comes out of the relations of production. And the relations of production have their basis in the mode of production. And if you don't understand that, you don't understand the fucking first thing. You don't understand the fucking first thing about anything. If you don't get mode of production, relations of production, horizon of possibilities, and how those things stack, and the actual order of those things, and then you just, they're just so racist. They're just anti-intellectual. That you're just scapegoating people who have a basis for their resentment in the actual material conditions that sustains them. And that makes it so that they can't have relationships with their families. Like this person in the image you see on the screen here, who is the truck driver who's going to leave for a couple months and his kids are crying. There's an objective basis for his resentment. He has more time to listen to things than any professional manager in the PMC. He has more time to listen to things and to learn things, but there's not mechanisms for him to harness all of that time and direct his interests towards something that would actually equip him to know what he's talking about. And so, of course, anti-intellectualism is a response. Where was the left when Rush Limbaugh was building his media career? Where was the left? It wasn't on AM radio. Why not? Why was there? And I'm using left broadly. Obviously, leftists weren't on the AM radio, but where was Democrats? They weren't on AM radio across the airwaves, across the entire country. The ideological infrastructure that appeals to blue-collar workers has its basis in a media infrastructure, and it's not just like someone like Rush Limbaugh comes out and because he's got hate in his heart or because he's a resentful guy, that makes these guys into conservative truckers. No, he appeals to them, he speaks to them, and he speaks to the resentment that they feel in their bones because they don't get to have relationships with their families because some hall monitors who were sitting in the front row of their classes now went to college and sit there and talk about queer ideology and how, you know what, if you don't like that your kid is going to want you to call them they, them, well, then you're just a bigot and you should have your kids taken away or you should go to prison. Yeah, you think that the guy's going to like that? It's not, even if what you were saying was just, even if what you were saying was true, it's the delivery and it's this actual like elitist hatred of the populace that scapegoats that worker, that gives that worker a good reason to fucking hate you, right? That is what my piece in Underground Theory is all about. You got to go read it if you haven't read it. But ultimately, you'll get that in this course. And it's like I said, I've got only a few minutes here to close this out. And then I'll drop the live audience into a premiere. I'm premiering a video. I want you all to stick around if you have the time. You'll be able to see that. It's going to be a great video. It's going to be the best video. But for now, what I have up on the board here is philosophy of science, political philosophy, history of ideas, continental theory, analytic philosophy, natural versus human / historical / social sciences. I've got Marx, Heidegger, Levinas, Bourdieu, Baudrillard, Latour. I've got normie, fringe, representation, recognition, meritocracy, inferiority, superiority complexes. What is the sort of causal order of all of these things on the whiteboard? Why do I have them here? That's what I kind of want to close out on. My project comes out of trying to think a few thinkers deeply and bring them into the current juncture and try to understand the current juncture through those thinkers. The contradictions that make up the field of the Marxist way of seeing things or the Heideggerian way of seeing things is a great way to approach trying to see the totality, because these are two thinkers who tried to see the totality, and the people who study them are also trying to see the totality. And so those people who are still existing today, who are thinking about the most important contradictions in these fields, they're bringing these perspectives to bear on the current situation. Now, Heideggerians are usually very oblivious to almost anything going on for real, because most Heideggerians kind of take this, oh, it's just ontology, and it's kind of silly the way that they approach it. So I don't care so much about the current debates there. There is something that we really have to get into between Thomas Sheehan and Johannes Fritzsche and I think Emmanuel Fay and Richard Wolin. We'll get into it eventually. But of course, in my Being in Time course, I do develop that. But Being in Time is an approach that forever changed how every one of the most important social theorists of all time saw things. Especially now, Adorno and Habermas, maybe a little less so, more like Marcuse, right? Marcuse was super influenced by Heidegger and his, it's Marx, Heidegger, Freud. But with Foucault and Bourdieu, two people who break the mold, and they don't do sociology the way people normally do sociology. They don't do anthropology the way people normally do sociology. They bring those things into a sort of philosophical dialogue, and then they come up with their own kind of approach that kind of encapsulates all of those different things. They're coming at things from Marx and Heidegger. And Heidegger's about being in the world and the existential structures of our being in the world that get outside of just our own inner subjectivities and gets into the referential totality of equipment. The equipmental totalities is another way he has of saying it. But that's to say, you don't understand a hammer as a hammer. You understand a hammer by using it, and it only makes sense, which is to say has signification within a context of assignments and in order tos and goals and tasks. And it's within the relationships of those tasks and functions that hammer is embedded, and that you are ultimately able to use it towards the end of making a birdhouse or an actual house, whatever the case may be. Heidegger is all about that. Well, Marx is all about the critique of political economy, thinking about the circuit of capital, right? Thinking about M, C, M prime. And of course, MCM prime, turning money into commodities to turn into more money, to grow your money, just money, sign, go up, right? We're trying to think about what are the conditions of possibility to go to a society that has time energetic institutions that provide tutelage and help you find your talent and live a life outside of the profit motive. And so we don't have time energy right now because of MCM prime. But the question is how do we, this is like algebra, right? I think the microphone is probably blocking. So I'll go ahead and, can you see it now? Yeah, you can see it now. So MCM prime, A, time energy symbol, T cubed, or TTT, talent, time energy tutelage. How do we get to these time energetic institutions, T cubed? How do we use our time energy to get there? What is A, right? Basic algebra. What is A? This is part of what we're trying to theorize here. And we're trying to theorize it using the existential, structural, and critical political economic approaches of Marx and Heidegger, two thinkers of the totality who, to me, have a lot more concrete basis to inform us about our current situation than a Hegel. I think Hegel's fascinating. I'm pretty sure that at some point, Cadell and Mikey and McGowan, as well as Zizek, are going to convince me that I need to understand the science of logic. But until then, I'm not convinced, and I am convinced that you can get a lot further towards understanding our current juncture through Marx and Heidegger, two people who were profoundly influenced by Hegel, but also were like, okay, dude, but what you're missing is ... So it's like Hegel is an important basis for that, but I come at this from Marx and Heidegger, and then Levinas comes in as the imminent critique of both of them. And not just them as thinkers, but also Marxism and the Heideggerian cabals of the 20th century in Paris, France. And I say cabals as a joke, but they're I think it's more like mobs. There were gangs, roving gangs of Heideggerians that he had to engage with. Levinas, though, doesn't have the whole picture. I just finished Totality Infinity, the first half. We're going to resume in January. I'll be serially releasing 5 of those lectures over the next few months here on the channel and also on the podcast, so stay tuned for that. But Levinas, thinking Marx and Heidegger inside out, calling into question and showing what ultimately they're missing. In my last 3 minutes here, I think what I'm going to do actually is read my characterization of his critique. And so in this video on my Instagram of this Asian girl who's punching the camera, I don't think you can really see it, but you could go check it out for yourself. I memed it and I said, this is Levinas coming after his mentors, Husserl and Heidegger, and by implication, the rest of the history of philosophy in his imminent critique of intellectualist and instrumental theories of knowledge, taking themselves to be fundamental while missing sensibility-based enjoyment that lives off the elemental, the welcome of the dwelling, and the teaching other who opens the dimension of height via calling the ego into question, provoking shame in naivete, and thus spawning the idea of infinity, apology, and the entire project of science and reason. That's what he would say Plato through Spinoza and Hegel and Heidegger and Marx all are missing. Well, he doesn't get it all figured out, though. There are certain anthropological assumptions that he maintains that Bourdieu is going to destroy, right? And so Bourdieu becomes absolutely essential to critiquing sociology and anthropology and extending the Heideggerian project while at the same time critiquing it, and extending the Marxist project while at the same time critiquing it. And he doesn't do critique of political economy. He is focused on this sort of institutional matrix and how people are made by institutions, because he's surrounded by radicals who don't realize the functions they serve in the reproduction of a class society. So that's what he's going to focus on. And then we have the critique of him that we'll get to next year in Mikey's course, Introduction to Baudrillard. And then after that, Latour, How We Have Never Been Modern. Basically, Bourdieu, Baudrillard, Latour are absolutely essential for critiquing Levinas, but Levinas is also essential to critiquing them. And considering the fact that none of them really read Marx or Heidegger, Marx and Heidegger actually come in as a critique for all of them, because there have been significant advancements in those fields that they don't know about. They don't know about value form theory. They didn't read Thomas Sheehan. They don't know about Alexander Dugin. So there's some really important stuff going on. That's my basis. You don't have to read these guys for the rest of your life. You don't have to get this deep basis in these thinkers. But you stick around and you'll get it through osmosis. And then you'll understand how to approach philosophy of science as a philosophy of social science, which is to say a critique of the distinction between the natural versus human sciences, the critique of the natural versus historical and social sciences, the critique of philosophy of science missing political philosophy, and how political philosophy is actually part of the critique of philosophy of science in its own way. And then, of course, we've got the history of ideas and continental theory and analytic philosophy, and how all three of those have influenced me and how all three of those inform how I think about philosophy of science. So I just really wanted to take a minute to do a real session here and say, we're starting this thing, we're doing it, we're doing deep dives. This is the one that's public. Most of these won't be public. Most of these are happening in the background. The people who have access to this are the people who become members at Theory Underground for the Snellgrove-McKerracher synthesis. And Anne hasn't even gotten a chance to say anything about her sociological communication, which I don't know if she's able to quickly say something about it and close. But just so you know, everything I'm doing with Social 101, she's doing something similar with sociological communication. We're both trying to create these classes that we didn't get to take. If you want to take this really quick. Here is, hey, everybody, put your hands together for Anne. Here she is. We got to switch it out here in a second because the premiere's already started. So.
Yeah, so just really quick, and I'm sure in our kind of Snellgrove-McKerracher synthesis sessions that will be happening on, we haven't decided exactly which Sunday yet, but kind of like our monthly CMT and CDT. I'll just mostly be wanting to talk about a little bit more rigorously, what I'm teaching in my classes. And so, yeah, I'm not going as deep into like the Marx and the the PMC as Dave is, but I still, this last week I've kind of set up, okay, well, what is, because it was the first 2 weeks of school, like what is sociology? Why it matters, and then I'll be really doing like a critical media theory approach to my sociological communication class. So yes, we'll be doing some kind of classic talking about like the self and socialization, like things that you would learn in a Social 101 class, but we'll also be getting into propaganda and the media, doing some Chomsky meets Bernays, bring in some of those texts from CMT, like Hate Inc. by Matt Taibbi, and Reclaiming Conversation by Sherry Turkle. We'll be dissecting and trying to understand the current race and gender discourse and what kind of the current doxa is regarding those, as well as the main like sociology of race and gender, and then obviously bringing in class and PMC analysis and this critical approach to it all, bringing in Bourdieu and some Baudrillard and some Debord, and so just like, yeah, introducing them to people, because so often Social 101 classes are so removed from the people behind sociology. I'll be having them visit like primary text in class, and then the most important thing is I assigned them all one book to read over the course of the semester that they got to choose from a list with things from the CMT catalog all the way to like Time Energy. Nina's book was one of the options, so lots of options. I'm most excited about that. And I think we're going to close it out so y'all can get into the next stream. Dave and I are going to the theater, the local theater, and we couldn't be more excited to get this stuff going. So thanks for being here, everyone.
And what I'm about to drop you all into, the people who are on the live side of things, is Anne's introduction to Henry Ford versus Martin Heidegger, and it's my single lecture crash course on being in time. And so stick around in the chat. That's going public. It happened a few months ago as one of the things we do behind the scenes. It's one of the best lectures we've done together. I've been studying being in time for years. You're not going to find a single impassioned lecture breaking down some of the most important underrated aspects of that text anywhere else on the internet. So if you like this content, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and then go to the premiere for that video right now. Let's get to it. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and take care.
We cannot do direct revolution, but the only way to lay the foundation for it is to do what you are doing to move the underground. It's a theoretically correct title.
Welcome to Theory Underground, a place for workers with earbuds who are tired of letting others read and think on their behalf, slipstreaming our way into an understanding of a situation that short circuits the deadlocks of our moment.
Research at Theory Underground focuses on what is most